Chapter 2000. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, more than 30 days had passed. The ink storm outside the formation began to weaken, and Xiao Hua's soul thorn had made great progress. Especially after the first use, Xiao Hua combined it with practical use and comprehended more. After another 20 days, the ink storm outside the magic formation finally calmed down, and no more ink sand seeped in from the flaws of the magic formation. However, in the past 50 days of cultivation, in Xiao Hua's Jinyuan, a lot of ink sand was wrapped around the earth crystal Yao milk. At first, Xiao Hua didn't care because the amount of ink sand was small, and he spent all his energy on comprehending the soul thorn, so he rarely refined the earth crystal Yao milk. However, in the last few days, when the soul thorn was completed and he began to refine the earth crystal Yao milk, he discovered a great secret. Because this earth crystal Yao milk was wrapped in ink sand, the ink sand seemed to be able to corrode the earth crystal Yao milk. However, the earth crystal Yao milk was an extremely condensed form of earth power. Therefore, the ink sand's corrosive effect was almost negligible. However, because of this negligible corrosive effect, the solid earth crystal Yao milk was turned into gaseous or liquid earth power. This effect was much better than Xiao Hua's earth crystal Yao milk. Because Xiao Hua could directly refine the spiritual energy, he didn't need to face the solid earth crystal Yao milk. Of course, when the ink sand corroded the earth crystal Yao milk, the earth element spiritual energy was also damaged, but in front of the massive amount of earth crystal Yao milk, it was still insignificant. Xiao Hua discovered this phenomenon, and he couldn't help but be overjoyed. His cultivation speed suddenly increased by more than 3 times. Withdraw. Xiao Hua saw that the ink storm outside the formation was gone, so he stretched out his hand and grabbed the air. His 5 fingers flashed with a faint light, and hundreds of talismans were instantly collected in his hand. After Xiao Hua withdrew the formation, he scanned with his divine sense and was stunned again. He saw that he was surrounded by 4 or 5 Mo Zhao, which were 3 times bigger than the Mo Zhao he encountered before. Each of them wrapped their wings around their bodies, and pairs of blue eyes stared at him. "You're courting death." Xiao Hua saw that 2 Mo Zhao were unwilling to be left out, and their bodies twisted and were about to pounce on him. He sneered and performed the soul thorn technique, stabbing at the 2 Mo Zhao. Roar! Roar! The 2 Mo Zhao opened their mouths and rolled on the ground. Their eyes were filled with fear. "Since you're here, don't leave." Xiao Hua had been eyeing Mo Zhao for a long time. He knew that they were more precious than any green python. If he did not get at least 1 or 2 Mo Zhao in the Black Forest, how could he say that he had been here before? Then, Xiao Hua waved his hands and cast 2 earth condensation spells at Mo Zhao. The earth condensation spell had an advantage in this underground area where the earth's spiritual energy was abundant. While Mo Zhao was rolling on the ground, he did not put up any resistance and was immediately restrained by a layer of yellow light. Umitba. Xiao Hua sighed. He was hesitant to kill Mo Zhao. However, after thinking for a while, he still took out his spirit storage bag and stored the 2 ink horseshoes. Don't kill if you can. After that, Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense again. He found that the Mo Zhao, who had been eyeing him covetously just a moment ago, now had a look of horror in their eyes. The black brilliance on the surface of their bodies flickered, and they slowly retreated. Judging from their cautious looks, it seemed that they were afraid of being discovered by Xiao Hua. However, they were also afraid that they could not escape from Xiao Hua's evil clutches. They are also afraid of the strong and bully the weak. Xiao Hua snorted coldly. Then, he jumped up and flew toward the ground. Although there was no more ink storm in the depths of the ground, there was still a lot of ink storm near the surface. Xiao Hua flew for a while and then stopped. After estimating the amount of ink storm was enough, he sat down cross-legged and began to refine the earth crystal Yao milk. After flying for more than 20 days, Xiao Hua suddenly found that there were many Mo Zhao corpses near the surface. They must have been killed in the ink storm. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He released the two Mo Zhao from his spirit storage bag and collected the Mo Zhao's corpses. The harvest was far beyond Xiao Hua's expectation. He had collected more than 1,000 Mo Zhao's corpses. I'm rich. I'm rich. Xiao Hua, who had never seen the world, released his divine sense while he was underground. At the same time, he kept Mo Zhao, who had been scanned by his divine sense, into his space. He was beaming with joy, unable to close his mouth. Yes, Zhu Qinghe, Chun Yi, and the other two joined forces to kill two Mo Zhao, but they failed. However, he had collected more than 1,000 Mo Zhao in just half a day. If this was not a fortune, what was it? As for what the Mo Zhao could be used for and how to make a fortune, Xiao Hua, a miser, did not care about it. As long as he could get what he wanted, this was the golden rule that Xiao Hua followed in his heart. Where did this kid come from? How dare you steal my things? Xiao Hua was excited about his harvest. Suddenly, he felt a spirit sense sweep over him from above. A nascent soul realm cultivator's spirit sense had firmly locked onto him. Damn it! Xiao Hua was shocked. Without thinking, he immediately flew underground, ignoring the Mo Zhao's corpses that were close to him. Still want to run? Damn it, I took a risk to dive underground and search for a long time, but I couldn't find any Mo Zhao. It turns out that they were all taken by a little thief like you. A similarly tall and thin nascent soul realm cultivator appeared in the distance. His body flashed with a yellow light as he chased after Xiao Hua at an extremely fast speed. Xiao Hua's eyes turned as he flew. He used the sky-pilfering sun-swapping technique and gradually changed his appearance. He did not want to be remembered by a nascent soul realm cultivator and be hunted down all day long. The nascent soul realm cultivator saw that Xiao Hua was diving deeper and deeper, and his earth escape talisman was gradually reaching its limit. He couldn't help but be shocked. With a wave of his hand, he used the earth congealing technique and quickly smashed it toward Xiao Hua. Damn it, this guy is too sinister. Xiao Hua felt that the earth chi behind his spirit sense was becoming more and more stagnant. He cursed in his heart and no longer dared to dive deeper. He steeled his heart and rushed towards the surface again. Why are you flying up again? The nascent soul realm cultivator was stunned, and then he sneered. He knew that at this time, there was still Mo Zhao above the black forest. The Mo Zhao covered the sky and raged in the air. Even a nascent soul realm cultivator like him didn't dare to casually go out, for fear that the nascent soul in his dantian would be covered by the Mo Zhao's spirit sense and choke it to death. How could a little early foundation establishment realm cultivator like Xiao Hua survive? However, this little cultivator's face is very unfamiliar. He's around 50 years old, but he can cultivate to the early foundation establishment realm. And I don't know where he got the Earth Escape Talisman. The quality is better than mine. Which sect is he from? Who cares which sect he's from? I'll kill him, and the Mo Zhao in his storage bag is mine. I took a risk to come out and just found two Mo Zhao. One of them was thrown away by that brat. He must have some more in his storage bag. But then, the nascent soul realm cultivator was bewildered. Xiao Hua first dived down and then flew up. His entire body flew into the shape of a valley in front of him. The time and distance he took to do so was obviously longer than his own. Admittedly, he had rushed over from afar, but he had already escaped for such a long time. He should have caught up with Xiao Hua long ago. However, in his spirit sense, the distance between him and Xiao Hua didn't seem to have shortened at all. Could it be that a nascent soul realm enemy who hid his cultivation has set up a trap ahead? The nascent soul realm cultivator was somewhat hesitant. After all, Xiao Hua's performance as a foundation establishment realm cultivator was too astonishing. It didn't conform to common sense. Just as the nascent soul realm cultivator was stunned for a moment, Xiao Hua had already reached the same height as him. Moreover, he didn't stop and continued to escape upwards. Although there are many nascent soul realm cultivators in the Dawn Rain continent, I can recognize most of them. This brat, the nascent soul realm cultivator, changed his mind and clapped his hand again. A shiny talisman appeared in his hand. It was the Earth Escape Talisman. When he clapped his hand, the dim yellow light around his body lit up again. The black ground of the Mo Zhao Black Forest is too strange. There are too many Mo sand. Ordinary 5 elements escape technique can't be used. If I didn't find this Earth Escape Talisman, I wouldn't have been able to escape to such a deep place. If I hit on the ground like others, I would be able to escape the Mo Zhao, but I would also be able to obtain Mo Zhao's corpse. Thinking of Mo Zhao's corpse, the nascent soul realm cultivator's eyes lit up again. This Mo Zhao's magical use is something I found in an ancient book. I still have to test it. If it could be used, wouldn't my magic power increase by leaps and bounds? Mid-nascent soul realm is just around the corner. Besides, if I don't get more Mo Zhao's corpse now, wouldn't this Earth Escape Talisman be wasted? The nascent soul realm cultivator's divine sense had already scanned the surroundings. He didn't see any Mo Zhao's corpse, so he could only target Xiaohua. Xiaohua was too petty. If he left more than 10 Mo Zhao's corpse here, would the nascent soul realm cultivator chase you? Stay here. After the nascent soul realm cultivator finished thinking, he didn't hesitate anymore. He rubbed his hands together and released a dark green light. As the nascent soul realm cultivator waved his hands, the light turned into dozens of rope-like lights and chased after Xiaohua at an incomparable speed. Damn it! Xiaohua released his divine sense. He had already sensed the magic power in the light that was causing the true yuan in his meridians to stagnate. He couldn't help but curse inwardly. I'm just a foundation establishment realm cultivator. Is it worth it to chase after me like this? Yes, although Xiaohua had already mastered the bright thunder escape technique, he was only a gold core realm cultivator. Speaking of which, his flying speed was similar to a late gold core realm cultivator. It was far from being comparable to a nascent soul realm cultivator. Fortunately, he was now underground. The nascent soul realm cultivator used the Earth Escape Talisman that he was not familiar with. If he was in midair, he would have already been captured by the nascent soul realm cultivator. Run for a while more. Xiaohua's divine sense had already touched a lot of Mo Zhao, and he also felt the ferocity of Mo Bao on the ground. Although he didn't know whether he would live or die if he went deep into Mo Bao's body, he knew that as long as he fell into the hands of this nascent soul realm cultivator, his soul would definitely be searched. Chapter 2001. Xiaohua had already pushed his magic power to the limit. The true essence in his body rapidly rotated, and magic power rushed to the surface of Xiaohua's body as if it didn't need spirit stones. However, cultivation was cultivation, and there was no shortcut. Although Xiaohua had many secret manuals, in front of absolute strength, everything was nothing, absolute nothingness. The rope-like radiance immediately flew to Xiaohua's feet. Xiaohua's mind was filled with thoughts. Spiritual fire, flying sword, true samadhi fire, soul thorn, and so on, seemed to be able to resist one or two of them. However, the radiance controlled the surrounding spiritual energy, completely killing any of his delusions. Xiaohua understood that the spiritual fire might be able to break through this radiance. But what about after 2 spiritual fires? Rather than that, it was better to keep it a secret. At this time, the more secret techniques he had, the more he would attract a fatal disaster. Zilala. Just as Xiaohua gave up resisting, the radiance wrapped around Xiaohua's feet. In an instant, the magic power in his feet was frozen. Moreover, the radiance followed Xiaohua's body, and all of his magic power was incomparably stagnant. Even if Xiaohua activated the dragonization art, it had no effect. So it's a foundation establishment, baby. The nascent soul cultivator in the distance snorted. His previous vigilance was completely gone. After all, Xiaohua's methods were not the reaction of a nascent soul cultivator or even a golden core cultivator. However, at this time, from behind the nascent soul cultivator, there was a roar. Although it was much weaker than Mo Bao's, it was still incomparably strong. Together with a furious divine sense, it rushed straight towards the nascent soul cultivator. The nascent soul cultivator's divine sense swept back and was immediately shocked. He saw a 3 zhang thick and several zhang long giant mo bow flapping its huge wings and flying towards the nascent soul cultivator. Giant mo bow? The nascent soul cultivator was overjoyed. At this time, he couldn't care less about Xiao Hua in front of him. His figure suddenly flew up, and while dodging the mo bow, he rubbed his hands together, and rays of light flew towards the giant mo bow. Unfortunately, the giant mo bow flapped its wings, and rays of black sand flew over, blocking the rays of light. At the same time, it opened its mouth, and balls of black air flew over like small fish blowing bubbles. These bubbles were bursting and melting the multicolored light. Seeing this, the nascent soul cultivator was somewhat discouraged. The giant ink centipede's body was too huge, and the black skin on the surface of its body had the characteristic of restraining the ink sand, so it was not afraid of the cultivator's magic. Although it was not difficult for the nascent soul cultivator to kill the giant ink centipede in the air of the ink centipede black forest, it would be somewhat difficult to do so on the ground. Just as the nascent soul cultivator slapped his forehead and was about to summon his Dharma treasure, an unpleasant sound rang out from beneath his feet. The nascent soul cultivator scanned the area with his divine sense, and his face unconsciously turned ugly. Not far from his feet, a dozen or so giant ink puppets emerged from the ground. They flapped their wings and flew toward the cultivator. Damn it, why didn't I notice it just now? The nascent soul realm cultivator regretted his decision. However, he knew that Mo Zhao was a ferocious creature of the earth element. It was not easy for him to be discovered by a cultivator's divine sense if he hid underground. Let's go. The nascent soul cultivator made up his mind and flew toward Xiaohua. In his heart, he was still thinking about those Mo Zhao corpses that might exist, but in fact they really do exist. However, as soon as he moved, Xiaohua's figure was even faster. He scuttled to the ground like a fleeing rabbit. Huh, how can this guy move again? The nascent soul cultivator was slightly stunned. Obviously, the ink sand from the giant ink centipede had blown onto Xiaohua's body. Under the corrosion of the ink sand and Xiaohua's enormous strength, the nascent soul cultivator's confinement Dharma treasure had just been broken free. Oomph. The nascent soul cultivator rubbed his hands again without hesitation, wanting to confine Xiaohua. However, at this moment, the ink sand from the dozen or so giant ink centipede flew toward him. The nascent soul cultivator did not dare to not use a Dharma treasure to avoid it. When he dodged the huge amount of ink sand and chased after Xiaohua again, Xiaohua had already fled far away. This guy is definitely up to something. The nascent soul cultivator naturally would not let Xiaohua go. Seeing that Xiaohua was still quite a distance away from the ground, he waved his hand again. A rope-like Dharma treasure flashed with a brilliant brilliance and was about to attack Xiaohua. However, at this moment, the nascent soul cultivator's body began to flicker with an earth-yellow brilliance. The Earth Escape Talisman seemed to be losing its effect. Damn it! The nascent soul cultivator couldn't help but curse inwardly. He stopped channeling his magic power and reached out to take out another talisman. By the time he placed the talisman on himself and was about to unleash his magic treasure, the dozen or so ink sand stream cultivators once again charged at him from all directions. Go! The nascent soul cultivator was furious. He pointed his finger, and the Dharma treasure flew like a spirit snake toward the giant ink centipede closest to him. His figure swayed, and he actually disappeared from his original position. In a moment, he reappeared about 10 zhang away. However, when he reappeared, the nascent soul cultivator's face was somewhat abnormal. Moreover, the Earth Escape Talisman's brilliance had dimmed a bit. Seeing that his Dharma treasure was being pushed up high by the giant ink centipede's Dharma treasure and was unable to do anything, the nascent soul cultivator slapped his forehead and instantly released his pressure. Not only did it rush toward the giant ink centipede, it also pressed down on Xiaohua. However, when Xiaohua's figure was slightly sluggish, the nascent soul cultivator's divine sense suddenly felt a piercing pain like a nail. Ouch! The nascent soul cultivator could not help but exclaim in a low voice. He looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. After a slight sluggishness, his figure once again shot up. Then he endured the pain and spread out his divine sense. Strange. Seeing that there was no one nearby, and only a dozen or so giant ink centipedes eyeing him covetously, the nascent soul cultivator unconsciously narrowed his eyes and looked at Xiao Hua. Could it be that this little cultivator's body still has some secret technique? Since he had this kind of judgment, the nascent soul cultivator would not let Xiao Hua go. He pointed his finger, and the Dharma treasure once again flashed with brilliance and flew toward Xiao Hua. While he was dealing with the giant ink centipede, he also flew toward Xiao Hua. It's hard to escape this calamity. Seeing the Dharma treasure flying closer and the surrounding spiritual chi of heaven and earth being completely controlled, Xiao Hua cursed in his heart. He opened his mouth, and the scarlet spiritual fire slightly revolved in the air, turning into a thin thread and wrapping around the rope. Hiss! With a light sound, the brilliance on the rope flickered. The rope was like a dying frozen snake, stopping in midair. Hiss! The nascent soul cultivator was shocked. He did not expect that Xiao Hua would actually be able to injure his Dharma treasure. At the same time, the nascent soul cultivator was furious. Yes, he was really furious. In his divine sense, he had already seen that the Dharma treasure was almost completely destroyed. If he wanted to repair it, he did not know how much energy and materials he would have to spend. Umph. The nascent soul cultivator slapped his forehead. A large hand appeared for the top of his head and directly grabbed at Xiao Hua. Chapter 2002. When the hand reached out from the nascent soul cultivator's head, it was only a few feet long. Then, as it soared, it sucked in the surrounding spiritual energy. When it was not far from Xiao Hua, it had already grown to 10 feet long. Of course, Xiao Hua had seen this long ago. He was trying his best to escape above his head, but when the giant hand came down, the surrounding space suddenly gave birth to a kind of force that Xiao Hua couldn't resist. Not only did the true essence in Xiao Hua's meridians come to a standstill, unable to flow in the slightest, but even his body was grabbed, unable to move in the slightest. Forget it. Xiao Hua's expression was normal. He naturally knew that the nascent soul cultivator's methods were endless. He only wanted to sneak out of the ground. Being captured alive was not out of Xiao Hua's expectations. Moreover, at this time, the nascent soul cultivator's hand was quite powerful. It flashed with a faint green color. Not far away, the dozen or so giant ink puppets attacking the cultivator hesitated and stopped. Let's see where you can run to. The nascent soul cultivator sneered. He urged his magic power to escape and capture Xiao Hua. Coincidentally, with a loud woo sound, a huge storm of ink sand suddenly appeared on the surface of the earth where there were already some aftershocks of the ink storm. It came rushing down from the surface of the earth. Swish, swish, swish. Countless ink storms quickly washed over the nascent soul cultivator's hand. The nascent soul cultivator did not dare to be negligent. He slapped his hand, and a dark green ring flew out from his storage bag. A thick layer of brilliance completely covered him. At this time, the nascent soul cultivator looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. Xiao Hua's body actually moved, although it was only a slight movement. Then he saw Xiao Hua spit out a red spark. This time, the spark turned into a thin line and burned Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua's body flashed with little sparks, as if he was completely ignited by the spark. Looking at Xiao Hua again, he raised his hands and took out two huge demonic hammers. He crazily hammered his body for a while. What caused the nascent soul cultivator to be dumbstruck was that after Xiao Hua's crazy actions, his entire body broke free from the giant hand like a fish. Like a moth flying into a flame, he threw himself into the ink storm that was once again swarming over without hesitation. Is there something wrong with this cultivator's brain? The nascent soul cultivator was stunned. I just want to take Mo Zhao's corpse from him. I don't necessarily want to kill him. How could he commit suicide like this? Inside his storage bag, could there be an earth-shattering, unspeakable secret? He actually risked his life to charge into Mo Bao's territory, where even nascent soul cultivators don't dare to enter. He didn't want me to capture him, but as the nascent soul cultivator saw the ink swarm violently rushing toward his hand once more, he didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly retracted his hand, but at the same time, dozens of giant ink swarm pounced towards him once more, vowing that they wouldn't let him off. Damn it! All I did was take Mo Zhao's corpse. Why are all of you so desperate? That guy was so reckless just now. Did he take dozens of them? Why don't you go and vent your anger on him? Why are you looking for me? The nascent soul cultivator didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He understood that Mo Zhao was a ferocious beast. Once Mo Zhao died, its corpse would be devoured by other Mo Zhao. This time, he didn't know how many Mo Zhao had died in the ink swarm. It was a good opportunity for these giant Mo Zhao to grow. It was precisely because of the corpse in his storage bag that the giant Mo Zhao coveted it. But the problem was, why didn't these giant Mo Zhao chase after Xiaohua? Could it be that I've wronged that guy? The nascent soul cultivator didn't want to waste his magic power. While escaping from the giant Mo Zhao, he thought, unfortunately, even if the nascent soul cultivator was 100 times smarter, he would never be able to guess the number of Mo Zhao's corpses piled up like a mountain in Xiaohua's space. Yes, this was the real reason why the giant Mo Zhao chased after the nascent soul cultivator. Xiaohua, who broke free from the nascent soul cultivator's shackles, was now like a tiny little bird in the ocean waves. He was lifted out from the ground by the ink swarm. In a situation where he struggled to no avail, he had no choice but to fly along with the waves of the ink swarm. The omnipresent ink swarm invaded Xiao Hua's physical body, dharma body, meridians, blood vessels, and other places. In a short moment, Xiao Hua's meridians were blocked. The ink swarm also gathered at the 13,200 million points of his physical body and dharma body. Moreover, as the ink swarm increased, it also became bigger. Damn it, Xiao Hua felt the changes in his body. Naturally, he knew how powerful it was. He tried to urge his magic power, but only a sliver of it could be used. It was like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood with a cup of water. Helpless, Xiao Hua could only use the ethereal steps. He was barely able to maintain a slight balance in the ink swarm. With a wung sound, a thick blackwood flew out from Xiao Hua's side and directly smashed towards his waist. Looking at the strength of the blackwood, it should be at least 1,000 caddies. At this moment, Xiao Hua, who did not have any magic power to protect his body, was hit by the blackwood. He would definitely lose his life like the gold core old man from before. However, how could Xiao Hua be such an ordinary cultivator? With a wave of his hand, he took out the devil hammer and waved it slightly. With a kacha sound, the thick blackwood was broken into 2 pieces. The broken blackwood brushed past Xiao Hua's body and frantically flew to other places. Just as Xiao Hua took out the devil hammer and his entire body landed, a bright light suddenly flashed in his mind. This devil hammer is so heavy, but it actually did not smash the blackwood into pieces. This blackwood, its texture is definitely not ordinary. Xiao Hua came to a realization. Moreover, even Mo Zhao hid under the black forest to hide from Mo Zhao. What about the blackwood? It has no legs. Where could it hide? How could it not be destroyed by the ink swarm? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the nearby blackwood, which was already as big as a wall. Without any hesitation, he walked over to her. At this moment, the ink swarm was very fierce. The whistling wind blew away the branches and leaves of the blackwood. Xiao Hua held the incomparably heavy devil hammer, and his entire body swayed in the ink swarm. Fortunately, it was only a few steps. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the devil hammer returned to his space. In an instant, his body was blown up by the ink swarm, and he directly pounced on the blackwood in front of him. Seeing that the matter was settled, Xiao Hua tried his best to urge the little bit of magic power he had left and used the wood escape technique. Xiao Hua's body flashed with a light green brilliance, and he disappeared into the black wood. Once he entered the black wood, Xiao Hua felt as if he was in a different world. The entire world was peaceful. However, Xiao Hua did not have any leisure mood at this moment. He even rejoiced that he managed to escape. Instead, he hurriedly used his inner vision to check his meridians. At this moment, Xiao Hua's meridians were completely filled with black sand. All of his meridians were blocked, and there was not a trace of true essence. Of course, Xiao Hua used the spirit fire twice in succession underground, and the true essence in his body had long been completely consumed. The little bit he had left was used to use the wood escape technique. His true essence was not corroded by the black sand. However, the thing that worried Xiao Hua the most was that his dantian was filled with ink sand as well, and the faint point from before had already been corroded by the ink sand at this moment and vanished. It was even to the extent that his entire dantian and meridians seemed to be filled with a feeling of numbness and itchiness, as if countless ants were lightly biting him. This was also Xiao Hua. His meridians cultivated the dragon transformation art, and he had already been baptized by the lightning tribulation when he was building his foundation. He could be considered to have been reborn. At this moment, he was still able to endure the corrosion of the black sand. If it was someone else, they would have already suffered irreparable damage. Xiao Hua wanted to use the spirit fire to see if it was effective against the black sand. However, he did not have the slightest bit of magic power and was simply powerless to urge it. After thinking for a moment, he urged the dragon transformation art. Like a huge dragon swinging its tail, he wanted to first eliminate the black sand that was corroding his meridians. However, right now, his entire meridians were filled with black sand. After getting rid of a layer, the rest of the black sand stuck to him, and there were countless of them. What should I do? Xiao Hua was somewhat dazed. At this moment, Xiao Hua's entire body flickered with brilliance. Obviously, his magic power to support the wood escape technique was already insufficient. I'd better use the mental cultivation method first. Xiao Hua made a prompt decision and immediately urged the earth expansion technique. He wanted to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from the outside world to refine the earth crystal Yao milk. However, it was fine if he did not draw spiritual energy. Once he drew spiritual energy, he discovered that the entire black wood was filled with condensed black sand. That black sand was like a stubborn stone, blocking all the cracks. Not even the slightest bit of spiritual energy of heaven and earth could enter. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. Of course, at every moment, the black wood was within the black sand. How could it not absorb the black sand? It was also because it absorbed an extremely large amount of black sand that the black wood was so hard and so calm inside. That was why the black sand could not invade. What should I do now? Xiao Hua was again at his wit's end. Without true essence in his meridians, he could not urge his magic power. Without magic power, the wood escape technique could not last for long. He would definitely be squeezed out of the black wood. Facing the overflowing black sand, he was exposed to the black sand for a moment, just now. All of his cultivation was knocked down, and he was completely supported by the dragon transformation art. If he stayed in the black sand for a long time, he would definitely be corroded by the black sand and become immortal. However, just as Xiao Hua was in a hurry, the black sand in his meridians slightly loosened again. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. When he looked carefully, he discovered that the corroded black sand near the earth crystal Yao milk disappeared a little. Moreover, even more earth-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth was actually forming in Xiao Hua's meridians. Great! Xiao Hua was overjoyed. On one hand, he activated the dragon transformation art, and on the other, he hurriedly activated the mental cultivation method of earth expansion. When the spiritual energy seeped out from the gaps in the ink sand's meridians, he hurriedly refined the spiritual energy, turning it into threads of true essence. Before the brilliance of the wood escape technique flashed, he hurriedly replenished his magic power. seeing the light green brilliance around Xiao Hua gradually stabilizing. Xiao Hua finally relaxed. He took the time to examine his body, bloodline, Dharma body, and other places. There is not a trace of black sand in my bloodline. Xiao Hua was slightly surprised. Although there is some black sand in my body, it seems to be condensed together. It is somewhat similar to the black sand in the black wood. Io Dharma body. Xiao Hua suddenly had some understanding. Chapter 2003. Xiao Hua's Phoenix Dharma body was condensed from the wind of the netherworld, so it wasn't solid at all. At this time, when he saw the ink sand occupying the Dharma body and not corroding the Dharma body, he was enlightened. With a shake of his arms, the Dharma body flew out of his body and out of the black wood. The Phoenix Dharma body was like the wind of the netherworld, so it did not seem to be blown away by the ink storm. It swayed as it flew to the top of the black tree. The black tree was huge, so the Phoenix Dharma body was not particularly obvious. As it spread its wings, the ink sand that was everywhere rushed into the Dharma body. It quickly gathered at the 132 million points and expanded. Good. Xiao Hua could not help but laugh again. I have this Dharma body cast with ink sand. Even if I meet Huang Yi again, she can't just blow this Dharma body away, right? Soon after, he no longer paid attention to the Dharma body and concentrated on refining the spiritual qi. He wanted to remove the ink sand from his meridians as soon as possible. However, at the beginning, there was very little true qi. Xiao Hua could only refine it bit by bit. He even had time to think about other things. For example, why didn't the ink sand seep into the black tree? For example, who was that nascent soul cultivator Xiao Hua met? But after waiting for a few hours, when the ink sand in his meridians decreased by 10%, Xiao Hua felt that something was wrong. An unprecedented crisis seemed to quietly descend on Xiao Hua's meridians. This was because, under the corrosion of the black sand, the earth attribute heaven and earth spiritual qi within the earth crystal Yao milk was released without any restraint. It was far from the orderly process when Xiao Hua was refining it himself, and the heaven and earth spiritual qi was extremely abundant. This was only the beginning, but the heaven and earth spiritual qi was already so abundant that Xiao Hua was somewhat overwhelmed. If in the future, there would definitely be a lot of spiritual qi being corroded by the ink sand, then Xiao Hua would not be able to refine it. Not only would his meridians and dantian explode, even his physical body would be hard to protect. Damn it! Xiao Hua scratched his ears and cheeks. He was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. What he had to do now was either to refine the spiritual qi or to stop the ink sand from corroding the earth crystal Yao milk. But what method did he have to stop the ink sand? Xiao Hua even wanted to jump out of the blackwood and let the ink sand block his meridians again. But obviously, Xiao Hua understood that even if he went out now and the black sand continued to block his meridians, the amount of black sand corroding the earth crystal Yao milk would only increase, not decrease. In other words, before the earth crystal Yao milk was completely corroded, and before a huge amount of earth-attributed spiritual energy was released, Xiao Hua would only have more chances to explode. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua couldn't think of any way to deal with such a huge crisis. Let's fight. This is also a great opportunity. Xiao Hua was helpless. He hurriedly sat down cross-legged and activated the dragon transformation art with all his might. At the same time, he immersed his mind into the space and connected to the primordial spirit brand in the heavenly Tao space. He hurriedly activated the earth expansion technique, hoping that he could use a stupid method before he thought of a way. Damn it, why am I so stupid? How could I possibly explode? Xiao Hua just activated his cultivation method and wanted to curse himself, because not long after his true essence was formed, it was immediately corroded by the black sand and disappeared. His meridians simply couldn't store true essence. Alas, what a pity for the earth crystal Yao milk. Xiao Hua's heart calmed down a little, but his heart ached for his earth crystal Yao milk. However, his heart only ached for a moment, and he wanted to slap his own mouth again. How could things be as simple as he thought? Although his true essence was corroded, the amount of black sand that disappeared was not much. It seemed that this black sand was the nemesis of true essence. Moreover, in the space created by the disappearance of true essence, more spiritual energy gathered, and the volume was far greater than the amount of true essence that disappeared. What Xiaohua needed to do now was to refine the spiritual energy into true essence. There was no other way. Xiaohua's true essence had never flowed like this before. Circle after circle, it was like a small stream flowing down from the top of a mountain. It avoided the layers of black sand and flowed into the dantian where the black sand gathered. Xiaohua's dantian was also filled with black sand at this time. Every time a trace of true essence entered, it would be corroded by the black sand, and the amount of black sand would also decrease. Although there was a lot of black sand in his dantian, it couldn't stop Xiaohua's true essence from flowing like water. First it was a small stream, then it was a small river, and then it was like a river. After waiting for several hours, Xiaohua's head was full of sweat. He clenched his teeth and activated his cultivation method. When he was in a state of madness, the black sand in his dantian was finally emptied, and the moment the black sand was emptied, his entire dantian slightly trembled, as if everything had started anew. The true essence that was once again injected rapidly rushed into the dantian, where the virtual dot disappeared. A brand new, even more condensed little dot was born again, and after the true essence injected into the virtual dot suddenly disappeared, it reappeared. This time, it was different from before. The density of the true essence had more than doubled, and its volume had naturally shrunk again. And after the transformation, the majority of the true essence remained in the dantian, and a very small part once again rushed into the meridians. Obviously, Xiaohua's cultivation had made great progress after the destruction. But at this time, Xiaohua was anxiously refining the spiritual energy, paying attention to the growth of the spiritual energy with all his attention. He simply didn't notice the change in his true essence, because at this time, the speed at which the black sand was disappearing couldn't compare to the speed at which the spiritual energy was being produced. Even though the true essence had shrunk by more than half, the spiritual energy contained in the earth crystal Yao milk was really too much. Now only half of it had disappeared. What method? What method? Xiaohua was burning with impatience. On one hand, he was thinking of a method, and on the other hand, he had to calmly comprehend the heavenly Tao. He had to increase the speed of refining the spiritual energy as much as possible. It was really difficult for him. Roar! Right at this time, Xiaohua's dragon transformation art seemed to have some changes. His entire meridians began to tremble, and a faint dragon roar was produced in Xiaohua's body, as if his meridians were about to fly away. At first, it just so happened that it was in Xiaohua's middle dantian. Xiaohua felt that the dragon-like meridians didn't have a dragon head, or perhaps the dragon head was in the middle dantian and was tightly pressed down by an incomparably huge thing. The dragon-like meridians couldn't fly away. Xiaohua was shocked. A kind of inexplicable uneasiness arose in his heart. Could it be? Could it be? Xiaohua mumbled for a long time, but still couldn't come up with anything. It seemed that apart from his middle dantian being imprisoned like the Naiwan Palace, he couldn't think of any other reason. Donrain Continent's martial arts were to cultivate the lower dantian, and didn't involve the middle dantian at all. All cultivators also wouldn't check the middle dantian. Of course, Xiaohua also didn't think of this at all, and at this time, he suddenly discovered that his middle dantian was actually different. How could he not be shocked? Chapter 2004. Could it be that I'm really a celestial from overseas? Xiaohua seemed to think of the legendary Celestial clan. He heard that they were celestials who only cultivated and didn't practice magic, or cultivators who cultivated the middle dantian. Roar! Under the dragon transformation art, Xiaohua's meridians seemed to have expanded a lot, but it clearly wasn't the limit. However, his meridians were already somewhat unable to bear it. They were restless, as if trying to break free from the shackles of his middle dantian. Xiaohua had already sensed the previous danger, but he still didn't feel the danger in front of him. What he was facing was not only the risk of his meridians bursting, but also the middle dantian, where the dragon head of his meridians was the black and white seal was emitting a faint brilliance. It was extremely easy to suppress the vibration of his meridians. Moreover, an incomparably valiant spiritual energy fluctuation was emitted from it. And, fortunately, although the ink storm in the ink Zhao Black Forest was weakened, it was still ferocious. These spiritual energy fluctuations had just been emitted when they were corroded, worn down, and blocked by the nemesis of spiritual energy. Who exactly is this young master's enemy? Xiaohua clenched his teeth, abnormally angry. Not only did they seal this young master's Naiwan Palace, they even sealed this young master's middle dantian. Looks like this young master isn't an ordinary person who doesn't know how to cultivate. Moreover, this young master's cultivation is completely different from the cultivation methods of Xiaoyu continent. This young master's cultivation before being sealed might also be extremely high. The reason why this young master had to cultivate from the first level of qi refining, bit by bit, was because this young master's enemy completely sealed this young master's cultivation. However, after being angry for a moment, Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. Why to seal it? If it was an enemy, wouldn't it be fine if they just killed this young master or completely crippled this young master's cultivation? Why would they still waste a lot of energy to seal this young master? Could it be that they weren't afraid that this young master would cultivate again? Weren't they afraid that this young master would break the seal and kill his way back to take revenge on them? I know. They destroyed this young master's memory. Wasn't it because they didn't want this young master to know who they were? Weren't they afraid that this young master would go back to take revenge? Xiaohua coldly thought. In that case, this young master's previous cultivation was definitely not inferior to this enemy's. They couldn't kill this young master, so they had no choice but to use this method. Since that's the case, how can I disappoint you all? Xiaohua's viciousness grew from the side of his guts, and he fiercely said, "This young master will definitely not die here. I must recover my memories, recover my magic power, and find out who my enemy is." However, after his lofty aspirations, Xiaohua was only excited for a moment before he became dejected again. Not to mention that his enemy's cultivation was thousands of times higher than his. Even in his current predicament, he didn't have any means to escape. What revenge was there to talk about? At this moment, his meridians shook a few more times. The shaking reached his middle dantian and stopped again. Right now, his meridians were probably more than 10 times larger than before. The heaven and earth spiritual qi in them had nowhere to go. Xiaohua's meridians had the possibility of exploding at any moment. In the area where the earth crystal Yao milk was located, 30% of the black spots were still surrounded by a large amount of black sand. Jade blood pill heart refines. In his urgency, this arcane effort suddenly appeared in Xiaohua's mind. Damn it, I'm really a genius. Xiaohua carefully examined the arcane effort that flashed through his mind. He couldn't help but smile. No matter what this arcane effort was, as long as it could consume the true essence in his meridians, it would be fine. Fight! Xiaohua didn't have time to finish reading the arcane effort. He already knew that he had used it countless times before. He also didn't have time to consider the effects of touching his Naiwan Palace. He hurriedly activated the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique. Following the activation of Xiaohua's arcane effort, a wisp of heart fire was born from Xiaohua's true essence. This heart fire was like a single spark that started a prairie fire, igniting his entire meridians and even the true essence in his lower dantian. A light sound shook Xiaohua's mind. The true essence in Xiaohua's meridians had completely disappeared. Of course, when the true essence disappeared, the pain also came as expected. A feeling more painful than needles and thorns came from Xiaohua's Buddha, Sarira's big belly. It came from Xiaohua's sealed Naiwan Palace. Moreover, The black and white seal outside the Niwen Palace was the same as the seal in his middle dantian. It also emitted a faint brilliance, and a valiant spiritual energy was immediately emitted. Good. Xiao Hua didn't have time to care about the cold sweat on his forehead. He hurriedly activated his arcane effort to refine the heaven and earth spiritual energy in his meridians. 100 days passed. At the beginning, Xiao Hua had to use the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique once every 12 hours to endure the inhumane torture. But as time passed, after less than 10 days, it was changed to every 10 hours. In the end, it was changed to every 1 hour. Damn it. If this continues, even if this young master doesn't die from this headache, this young master's enemies will come looking for me. After using the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique so many times, Xiao Hua had already felt the slight changes in the seal on his Niwen Palace. He was very distressed as he thought. But fortunately, the Earth Crystal Yao milk has almost been completely refined by this young master. Although the meridians refined by the Dragon Transformation Art have expanded several times, they are still wandering around the limit. I can barely cope with it. As long as I use the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique a few more times, it will be done. Xiao Hua refined his Zhen Yuan while releasing his divine sense. At this time, although the ink cloud Black Forest was covered with ink sand, it was already the end of the ink storm. It was no longer as devastating as before. Not good. Xiao Hua saw that his Dharma body was still outside, and suddenly thought, other people's Dharma body is transformed from their blood vessels. This young master's Dharma body appeared when he cultivated the great strength Vajra Dharma body. Now that it has been filled with ink sand, can this young master still take it back? Even if I take it back, will it swallow my Jin Yuan? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua hurriedly and carefully withdrew the Phoenix celestial body. However, at this time, the Phoenix celestial body was already half full. He saw that the 13,200 virtual points wrapped around this solid black sand, which was already as solid as black wood. Outside the black sand, there was also the swirling netherworld wind. Fortunately, nothing unexpected happened. I could still take it back. Xiao Hua waited for the Dharma body to merge into his body, and there was no change. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. But then he complained, "Damn it, what is this? The Dharma body has been outside for more than 100 days, and it still hasn't been filled. This young master just went out for a moment and was already tormented to the point of death. This damned heavens, what are they thinking? Forget it, forget it. Let's hurry up and clean up all the ink sand." Xiao Hua complained, but in his heart there was no neglect. He gathered his strength and used the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique several times in succession. After several hours, he completely cleaned up all the ink sand. Chapter 2005. However, what Xiao Hua didn't know was that when Xiao Hua activated the Jade Blood Pill Refining Heart, the spiritual power fluctuation on the seal finally broke through the black sand of the ink Zhao Black Forest. It was extremely weak, but extremely fast. It spread out at a speed that Xiao Hua couldn't imagine, and the spiritual power actually spread in 2 different directions. In just half a day's time, in 2 cave residences that were extremely far away from the ink Zhao Black Forest. One was a white-haired old man with a youthful face, and the other was a dignified middle-aged cultivator. Both of them were in closed-door cultivation, and the spiritual power fluctuation easily broke through the restriction that they had set up. Obviously, this spiritual power fluctuation was extremely important. Almost at the same time, the 2 of them opened their eyes. Their expressions changed slightly, and they hurriedly urged their magic power to change their hand seals. The 2 people's hand seals were different, but they were both incomparably complicated. After waiting for half a meal's worth of time, the 2 of them let out a soft shout and struck the air. One of them had a mirror in front of him, the other had a misty color. However, both of them couldn't see anything after looking at it for a long time. They both frowned slightly. The middle-aged cultivator stood up and waved his hand, and a rainbow appeared. He said a few words to it, and then the rainbow flew away. The middle-aged cultivator wasn't in a hurry to cultivate, and he slightly paced. Strange. It seems like the fluctuation of the seal, but it seems like something is wrong. Could it be that it wasn't done by that old ghost? Well, it shouldn't be. That old ghost made a heart oath that he wouldn't act on his own accord. Could be that kid who did it? However, it's only been a few decades. It's impossible for him to cultivate to such a high level. Could it be that the other old fart saw it? Even more impossible, right? They saw the seal and didn't know that it was done by us. Those with higher cultivation than us wouldn't act, and those with lower cultivation wouldn't even dare to act? Could it be that there are other changes? The white-haired old man paced back and forth, and he secretly said, "However, looking at the spiritual power coming from the seal, there shouldn't be any problems with the seal. There shouldn't be any problems with the plan that we agreed on with that old fart. But how can we not break the heart oath and not let that old ghost know?" Alas, the heart oath that day was really strict. I'm afraid there are some problems. After smoking half a cigarette, both of their eyes lit up almost at the same time. Xiaohua, who was far away in the ink Zhao Black Forest, naturally couldn't know this. At this time, he was shrouded in a thick layer of surprise and had no time to care about other things. In the previous 100 days, he was in a race against time. He used the blood core refining heart technique to maintain the space in his meridians, S-meridians, space meridians, for fear of the huge amount of heaven and earth spirit chi of heaven's cores, and blood's heart's cultivation test heart sesti be used S's meridians. Just a moment ago, when the last trace of ink sand corroded the earth-type heaven and earth spirit chi of heaven and earth, Xiaohua used the blood core refining heart technique for the last time, transforming all the true essence in his body into a heart fire that directly rushed into his Niwen palace. That was really the most painful, piercing pain in the past 100 days, and the meridians in his body also returned to normal. Naturally, they were more than twice as big as before. Only at this time did Xiaohua completely calm down. Then, Xiaohua let out a long sigh of relief. Activating his heart technique, he once again refined the last trace of earth crystal Yao milk in his meridians. As the heaven and earth spirit chi of heaven and earth transformed into true essence, it once again flowed smoothly in his meridians, rushing into his lower dantian. When it rushed into that somewhat solid point, Xiaohua shockingly discovered that he seemed to have already advanced to the middle stage of foundation establishment. Good heavens, sure enough, there's a great terror between life and death. Xiaohua was so surprised that he was speechless. Originally, I thought that if other people needed 30 years to reach the early stage of foundation establishment, I would need at least 40 years or even 50 years. Therefore, I didn't concentrate on practicing the heart technique and usually just did routine homework. Even in these 3 years, I only focused on formations. Who would have thought that in a mere 100 days in this ink Zhao Black Forest, I would finish what other people needed 30 years to do? Really, I don't know what to say. Is this young master a genius? Moreover, according to eldest senior brother, there is a bottleneck from the early stage of foundation establishment to the middle stage of foundation establishment. There must be comprehension and accumulation. How come this young master didn't have any? How come everything went so smoothly? It seems like just now I didn't have the slightest feeling of a breakthrough. However, my meridians and Dharma body have some improvements, but bone tempering, there are some problems. It seems like there is no feeling of improvement like before. Could it be? In fact, in the 1 year when Xiaohua was in the early stage of foundation establishment, although he only focused on manipulating the spiritual fire, how could the spiritual fire be easily manipulated? Although Xiaohua couldn't practice the heart technique, the circulation of the true essence and the operation of the heart technique were the micromanipulation of the Dharma power. Xiaohua was very careful at every moment, and he constantly strived for perfection. His hard work in that 1 year was far more than other people's 5 years. Moreover, in Tianmen Mountain, the master who set up the formation was not an ordinary person. A formation that could kill a nascent soul cultivator. The formation master was at least a nascent soul cultivator. Xiaohua, with the cultivation of the early stage of foundation establishment, repaired the formation with the courtesy of the gold core cultivator, which was far beyond his own cultivation limit. Xiao Hua was able to repair all the formations in Tianmen Mountain in 3 years, and the hard work he put in was more than other people's 10 years of effort. Moreover, Huang Yi's painful experience gave Xiao Hua an essential understanding of the way of life and death in the way of heaven, which greatly promoted his cultivation. These factors piled up in the past. Xiao Hua's cultivation was bound to advance by leaps and bounds, but he just didn't have an opportunity. And the ink sand and ink bow in the ink Zhao Black Forest were exactly this opportunity. An opportunity to compress time, an opportunity to transform a huge amount of Earth's spiritual energy into true essence. Moreover, the early stage of foundation establishment was only the beginning of true cultivation. Xiao Hua was comprehending the way of heaven. So how could he encounter any bottlenecks? If the earth crystal Yao milk hadn't been corroded too much by the ink sand, Xiao Hua would have been close to the late stage of foundation establishment. Of course, if the earth crystal Yao milk hadn't been corroded by the ink sand and wasted a lot of heaven and earth spiritual energy, Xiao Hua's meridians would have burst long ago. As for whether Xiao Hua could survive or not, that was another matter. In addition, if he used the earth crystal Yao milk in the ink Zhao Black Forest and tried to increase his cultivation by leaps and bounds again, Xiao Hua probably wouldn't agree even if he was killed on the spot. No matter what, Xiao Hua had already entered the middle stage of foundation establishment. This was something worthy of celebration. However, Xiao Hua, who had always been careful, didn't rejoice for too long. After all, he had entered the middle stage of foundation establishment in a hurry, so his realm was still unstable. He also didn't dare to be negligent. He still sat cross-legged, his eyes focused on his nose, and his nose focused on his heart. He focused his mind and calmly operated his mental cultivation method, cycle after cycle, carefully cultivating. In the depths of the ink Zhao Black Forest, there was a barren area. There weren't any black trees, nor were there any vines. In that extremely dark area, there was actually some light on the ground. Several strange, spiritual beasts quickly flitted across it. Chapter 2006. These spirit beasts looked like monkeys, but they did not have tails. Their bodies were only covered with black animal skin, and there was no hair on their bodies. Although they had a pair of sharp eyes like monkeys on their leaf-like faces, their mouths were extremely wide, with 2 fangs sticking out of their mouths. They looked very ferocious. Squeak, squeak. One of the spirit beasts that was flying in the air suddenly screeched and pounced on the pitch-black ground. Then, its long arms, which were over its knees, suddenly reached into the ground. Roar! Emo Zhao, who was about 10 feet long and 3 feet wide, was pulled out of the ground by the spirit beast. The spirit beast's arms had pierced into Emo Zhao's body, and black blood was flowing out of the ground. Once Emo Zhao was pulled out of the ground, its 2 fleshy wings flapped quickly, and it was about to fly into the sky. The spirit beast's body was also brought up into the sky. Squeak! Squeak! The other spirit beasts were delighted when they saw this. They flew up one by one and pounced on the other parts of Emo Zhao's body. Hiss! Emo Zhao hissed and opened his mouth to spit out a dark cloud of air. It was aimed at one of the spirit beasts. At the same time, Emo Zhao swept his tail towards another spirit beast. Something strange happened. Emo Zhao's powerful mass of air, which even a gold core adept could not deal with, did not alert the spirit beast at all. When the mass of air was close to it, the spirit beast quickly stretched out its arm, revealing a palm with only 3 fingers. It reached into the mass of air as if it was searching for the moon at the bottom of the ocean. The 3 fingers of the spirit beast flickered with a dim light and easily pierced through the mass of air. A few balls of black sand in the mass of air hit the spirit beast's body in a flash. Although the spirit beast was pushed back a few times, it did not seem to be injured at all. When the spirit beast broke through the mass of air, Emo Zhao's tail had already hit another spirit beast. Although the spirit beast suddenly flew up, it was not as fast as Emo Zhao's tail. Bang! The spirit beast's waist was hit. Squeak! Squeak! The spirit beast stretched out its arms and stabbed into Mo Zhao's tail. Black blood flowed out, and Mo Zhao swung his tail up and down in pain, trying to get rid of the spirit beast. However, no matter how hard Mo Zhao struggled, the spirit beast would not let go. Its arm stabbed deeper into Mo Zhao's tail. Since the two spirit beasts were fighting like this, the other spirit beasts were having a much easier time. Two spirit beasts landed on Mo Zhao's wings, and another one landed on Mo Zhao's head. All three spirit beasts stretched out their extremely sharp fingers and stabbed into Mo Zhao's body skillfully. Roar! Roar! Mo Zhao screamed in pain. He did not have time to fight back, and he struggled to escape. However, Mo Zhao could only let out a few screams before his wings were dug out by the two spiritual beasts. They were thrown onto the ground with blood all over. Mo Zhao also fell to the ground from midair. In just a few minutes, the spirit beast on Mo Zhao's head lifted its hand with all its might, and there was a big hole in Mo Zhao's head. Hot, fragrant brain matter flowed out of the big hole. Several spirit beasts cruelly ate the brain matter of Mo Zhao, who was barely breathing, and flew away excitedly. Mo Zhao, who had lost his wings, was left rolling on the ground for an hour before he died. After another hour, a cold wind blew, and no other spirit beasts appeared in the Black Forest. After a faint wave of light flashed on a hill about 1,000 feet away from Mo Zhao's body, 3 human figures appeared. They were Chun Yi, Chang Yefeng, and Xie Zhiqian, who had taken off their invisibility talismans. The 3 of them looked pale, and their robes were slightly messy. They were looking greedily at Mo Zhao's body in the distance. Sure enough, there is always something to overcome something. Chun Yi sighed and said, Mo Zhao is the master of the Black Forest. He is everywhere in the Black Forest. All the cultivators, regardless of their cultivation level, are afraid of him. However, in this place, Mo Zhao is just the food of the golden armored centipede. Mo Zhao must have accidentally bumped into the Black Forest. The golden armored centipede did not have any golden threads on its body, so it is obviously still underage. Even so, Mo Zhao was still eaten alive by the golden armored centipede. Yes, it is such a dangerous place. I can't imagine how fellow cultivator Zhu Qing have found it. Chang Yefeng also sighed and said, We avoided Mo Bao and waited outside the Black Forest for nearly a year before we came here. Now, we have waited for 3 days. Why haven't we seen fellow cultivator Zhu yet? How would I know? Chun Yi stared at Mo Zhao's corpse and said absent-mindedly, Brother Zhu disappeared when Mo Bao was born. He did not even reply to the messaging charm that he sent outside the Black Forest. I'm afraid that he stayed in the Black Forest. There must be a lot of treasures in the Black Forest after Mo Bao. Xie Zhiqian licked his lips and said, There must be a lot of magic treasures and jade slips. There must be a lot of Mo Zhao's body. Fellow cultivator Xie, don't think too much. Fellow cultivator Zhu was able to enter the Black Forest safely last time, so he must have some tricks up his sleeve that we don't know about. We don't have fellow cultivator Zhu's skills in cultivation, so let's just look at what is in front of us. Chun Yi rolled her eyes and looked at Xie Zhiqian. She pointed at Mo Zhao's body and said with a smile, This is really a gift from God. It is a reward for us to go into the depths of the Black Forest. Fellow cultivator Xie, fellow cultivator Chang, and I will guard the area for you. You go and bring Mo Zhao's body here, so that we can divide it. Xie Zhiqian frowned slightly and looked to the left. He could only extend his divine sense for about 10 feet. He was worried that he could not extend it further. However, when he saw Chun Yi and Chang Yefeng smiling at him, Xie Zhiqian forced a smile and said, Fellow cultivators, please wait for a moment. As he spoke, his body floated up and slowly flew toward Mo Zhao's corpse. They were in the depths of the ink cloud Black Forest, close to the core. Although the amount of ink cloud in the air seemed to be much lesser, the ink cloud black sand was more corrosive to one's true essence. Moreover, the divine sense and Dharma power were restricted. The flying technique that cultivators usually relied on could not be used smoothly. Therefore, Xie Zhiqian had to be careful. Fortunately, Xie Zhiqian scanned his surroundings and released his divine sense to the maximum. Thus, he did not encounter any spirit beasts when he arrived at Mo Zhao's location. However, just as Xie Zhiqian was about to put Mo Zhao into his interspatial bag with a wave of his hand, he heard Chun Yi yelling from afar, "Fellow cultivator Xie, please wait a moment." Xie Zhiqian was stunned. He hurriedly waved his sleeves and took out his flying sword. He looked around. He saw that Chun Yi and Chang Yifeng were also cautious. They both took out their flying swords and looked into the distance. Xie Zhiqian followed their gazes and saw that behind the black hill in the distance, a human figure was flying and jumping on the black ground. It was gradually moving toward the three of them. Xiaohua. Xie Zhiqian was stunned. He exclaimed in disbelief, "This guy? How is he still alive? And he can find this place?" That's right. The three of them came together. Because of Mo Bao, the secret path that Chun Yi knew about no longer existed. They had no choice but to force their way through and spend a tremendous amount of effort to reach this place. Along the way, they didn't mention Xiaohua at all. In their hearts, Xiaohua was most likely killed by Mo Bao. Even if there was an extremely small possibility that he escaped from Mo Bao's Black Forest, it was still impossible for him to reach this place. But the fact was that Xiaohua was thousands of feet away from them. At the same time, he saw Chun Yi and the others. He was excitedly waving his hand and even shouting loudly, "This guy, does he want to die?" Chun Yi was shocked and angry. She immediately ordered Chang Yifeng, "Fellow cultivator Chang, go and pick him up. Don't let him shout like this." Chang Yifeng thought for a moment and said with a smile, "If he wants to die, let him be. What does it have to do with us?" "You." Chun Yi was at a loss for words. She glared at Chang Yufeng, but she had nothing to say. This was not her burial flower manner, and her cultivation was not stronger than Chang Yufeng's. She was not the one in charge, so she had no reason to order Chang Yufeng to do anything. While Chun Hua and Chang Yifeng were on tenterhooks, Xiaohua's face was full of joy. He flew to Chun Yi and the others and said with a smile, "Manor Lord Chun, Senior Chang, Senior Xie, I finally found you again." Looking at Xiaohua's sorry state and pale complexion, Chun Yi said indifferently, "You really exceeded my expectations. You actually managed to find this place. We have been looking for you outside the Black Forest for a long time, but we couldn't find you. Manor Head Chun, this junior is truly in a perilous situation this time." Xiaohua's face was full of joy when he heard that. He said, "This junior obtained Senior Zhu's jade slip." Seeing Xiaohua's eyebrows raised and his happy appearance, Chun Yi couldn't help but feel vexed. She waved her hand and said, "Forget it. There's no need to say any more. You being able to escape is your good fortune." She then looked at Xie Zhiqian, who had returned at the same time as Xiaohua, and said, "Fellow cultivator Xie, take out Mo Zhao's corpse. We will divide it." "Yes." Xie Zhiqian waved his hand and took out the corpse. Xiaohua was stunned when he saw the hole on Mo Zhao's head and the faint fragrance coming from it. He was very surprised and even said with admiration, "Senior Xie, you are so powerful. You actually killed Mo Zhao. I would have run away if I had seen Mo Zhao like this." Xie Zhiqian rolled his eyes at him and said, "This old man picked it up." Then he looked at Chun Yi and asked, "Manor Lord Chun, there are 4 of us now. How should we divide it?" Chun Yi was a little annoyed. If Mo Zhao was killed by the 3 of them, Xiaohua would not have a share. However, Mo Zhao was picked up, and the 3 of them did not do anything. Furthermore, Xiaohua happened to arrive at the scene. How could they not give him a share of the loot? Chapter 2007. Seeing Chun Yi's expression change slightly, Xiaohua, who already knew Chun Yi's temperament, quickly waved his hand and said, "Senior Xie, don't count me in. I'm already lucky to be here. If you find the heavenly een grass in the future, please help me." "Well, since Xiaohua doesn't want it, let's split it quickly." Chun Yi urged, as if she was afraid that someone else would appear. Xiao Hua doesn't want it, but we have to get it to him, Chang Yefeng said, dissatisfied with Chun Yi's stinginess. What do you mean? Chun Yi retorted and looked at Chang Yefeng. What can I mean? Chang Yefeng said with a smile. Xiao Hua is a junior, but we are seniors. We can't lose the dignity of seniors because of our selfish desires. Xie Zhiqian looked at Chang Yefeng strangely. He didn't think Chang Yefeng was a righteous cultivator. Xiao Hua was even more surprised. He looked at the two of them and quickly said with a smile, Senior Chang, thank you for your kindness. I don't know what use this Mo Zhao has. Let's do it this way. I only want a piece of Mo Zhao's skin. Xiao Hua roughly gestured with his hand. Chun Yi saw Xiao Hua's action and coldly looked into the distance, ignoring the three of them. When Chang Yefeng saw Chun Yi's reaction, he put his hands behind his back and didn't say anything. Xiao Hua and Xie Zhiqian understood. Xiao Hua smiled shyly at Xie Zhiqian, looking quite embarrassed. Xie Zhiqian shook his head with a wry smile and took out a flying sword. He cut a piece of Mo Zhao's skin and handed it to Xiao Hua. Then he asked Xiao Hua to divide the Mo Zhao into 3 parts. Although Chun Yi looked away, she had been paying attention to what was going on. After Chang Yefeng finished dividing Mo Zhao, she straightened up and put her share into her storage bag without saying a word. Chang Yefeng snorted and put his share away as well. Obviously, he still had some opinions about Chun Yi. Xiao Hua was surprised when he saw Xie Zhiqian put away Mo Zhao's body. He couldn't figure out what had happened between the 3 of them after not seeing them for a few months. Not only was there some disharmony, but Zhu Qinghe was also not here. However, only Zhu Qinghe knew the location of the Sky-Yin herb. If he wasn't here, what was the point of the 4 of them coming here? Moreover, Xiao Hua had already searched the surroundings before coming here and did not find anything special. He knew that this was merely a meeting place, and not the place where the 4 of them were going to compete in Sword Immortals. Of course, Xiao Hua had already carefully read through the information given by Jin Qing and knew that the place he was talking about was nearby. However, because he was afraid of missing out on Chun Yi and the others, he didn't dare to go and search for it. After the ink storm subsided, he immediately rushed over a few days later. Thank you, Senior, Xiao Hua whispered. What about Senior Zhu? Is he not here yet? Zhu Qinghe was neither cold nor indifferent to Xiao Hua, but he obviously didn't have any other thoughts. Xiao Hua was indeed a little worried for him. How would this old man know? Xie Zhiqian looked around and whispered, We were separated from the ink storm before, and we didn't get in touch with him. We thought he had already come here, but after waiting for a few days, we still didn't see any movement. I'm afraid this matter is a little strange. Chang Yefeng, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, The place where Taoist Master Brightsword and Li Xiubai fought is so secretive. How many cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent have searched this ink-storm black forest to no avail? Fellow Taoist Zhu, how could he have encountered him? Moreover, he came out of that place safely. What's so strange about this? Chun Yi sneered and glanced at Xiao Hua. Isn't Xiao Hua an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator? Didn't he safely escape from the ink storm and find this place safely? No matter what, Zhu Qinghe is an intermediate-stage gold core cultivator. Could it be that he can't compare to Xiao Hua? Xiao Hua laughed and didn't speak, but he secretly criticized Zhu Qinghe in his heart. At this time, Zhu Qinghe, I'm afraid he really can't compare to him. Chang Yefeng glanced at Chun Yi and didn't refute. He said, Moreover, there was no news for 4 years last time. In these 4 years, what did fellow Taoist Zhu do? What can be compared to the 9 stars transit Sword Spirit? Sword Spirit? Xiao Hua was stunned and immediately understood that the Sword Spirit was the thing that the 4 coveted. This, Xie Zhiqian nodded. I got the Fire Bat King of the Flame Forest Swamp. I always thought I could come to the Ink Storm Black Forest immediately, so I was always puzzled. Also, Chang Yefeng said, Our cultivation is inferior to fellow Taoist Zhu, but we escaped to the outside of the Ink Storm Black Forest after fellow Taoist Zhu. We all escaped. So where did he go? Moreover, we're already here, so why didn't he appear? Oh, could it be Zhu Qinghe has already gone? Chan Yi was shocked and shouted. Could it be that he has found a way to go there in these 4 years? Yes, it's possible. Xie Zhiqian was a little angry. However, I still hope that Zhu Qinghe has been buried in Inkstorm Black Forest. The problem is if Senior Zhu could go there by himself. Why didn't he go there by himself? Why did he invite the 3 seniors? Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. I'm afraid he wants to use us as a shield, Chang Yifeng said fiercely. Chun, he seemed to think of something and shook her head. I don't think so. Fellow Taoist Zhu told me that he had something to explain to me in the Inkstorm Black Forest. What? While Chinny was talking, Xiao Hua suddenly raised his head. In the opposite direction of Xiao Hua, Zhu Qinghe's figure was flying slowly at a low altitude. He was very cautious and was flying towards them. Just in time. Fellow Taoist Zhu is here. I'll ask him about the situation later. Chen Yi stopped talking and said thoughtfully, Oh, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting for so long. Zhu Qinghe cupped his hands and said before he flew near them, I was delayed by something. I'd like to atone for my mistake. Fellow Taoist Zhu, Chang Yifeng said with a smile. Even with our cultivation, we came here early. What's the matter? Yes, fellow Taoist Zhu. We can't send a messaging charm out of the Inkstorm Black Forest. Chen Yi said with a smile. Zhu Qinghe said mysteriously. What do you think I've gone? However, as soon as Zhu Qinghe finished speaking, the 4 of them flew in another direction at the same time. It was the place where the golden armored centipedes had disappeared. Their expressions changed slightly. Almost at the same time, the 4 of them clapped their hands together and took out invisibility talismans from their storage bags. They slapped the talismans on their bodies and disappeared. Xiao Hua was naturally quick-witted. The time it took for the invisibility talismans to hit him was not much slower than the 4 of them. In just a moment, more than 10 golden armored centipedes flew over and landed at the place where Mo Zhao had been killed. They circled for a while, looking for Mo Zhao's body. Chapter 2008. But because they couldn't find the corpse, these golden silk armored centipedes became somewhat agitated, and some even flew into a rage. They searched for a long time in the vicinity, and even passed by Xiao Hua and the others several times. Then, they roared a few times at one of the golden silk armored centipedes. Like monkeys scattering when the tree falls, the golden silk armored centipede that was reprimanded also hung its head dejectedly and flew at the very back. But when the last golden silk armored centipede flew past Chun Yi, it suddenly stopped and looked in the direction where Chun Yi's figure was hiding. Its nose twitched as if it had discovered something. Moreover, it hesitantly moved towards Chun Yi bit by bit. As the golden silk armored centipede got closer and closer, this spiritual beast became more and more excited. In the end, it actually started to squeak loudly. The other golden silk armored centipedes that had already left a long time ago were also attracted by this golden silk armored centipede. They stopped, and a few even flew back. Go, Zhu Qinghe growled. The 4 of them simultaneously appeared not far from the golden silk armored centipede and flew towards a direction at an extremely fast speed. Behind them, Xiao Hua didn't seem to be fast, but in reality, he didn't fall behind by much and flew up as well. Squeak, squeak. The golden silk armored centipedes were stunned for a moment. Then, they all flew up and chased after Chun Yi and the others. 3 days later, at the intersection of 3 mountain ranges, there was a place where the vegetation was slightly lush. It was abnormally quiet. Not only were there no sounds of birds or insects, there wasn't even the sound of the wind. The low shrubs were like black trees, pitch black like iron. The pitch black weeds were in the shape of 3 leaves, slanting towards the sky, giving off a heavy feeling. The bottom of this valley was filled with black fog. The black fog was also like pitch black mountain rocks. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't necessarily be able to see it. The top of the valley faced this side of the sky. But above the sky, there were layers of black clouds, like the clouds before a thunderstorm. However, These cumulus clouds were not as translucent as thunderclouds. Instead, they were pitch black. If one were to look closely, they would look like ferocious ghost faces. At a low altitude to the south, Zhu Qinghe and the other three suddenly appeared. As they struggled to fly in this direction, they looked back from time to time. When they were a few miles away, the four of them suddenly plummeted. Chun Yi and the other two were shocked, but Zhu Qinghe's face was filled with joy. He shouted, "Fellow Taoists, we are close to that place. Our Dharma power will be confined. Let's go down now. When we reach this place, neither the golden silk armor centipede nor Mo Zhao will dare to come here." "Ah, and here?" Chun Yi was slightly stunned. She regained her balance and asked curiously, "How did fellow Taoist Zhu find this place?" This is all fate." Zhu Qinghe smiled, but did not answer. The four of them landed on the mountain path, looking very embarrassed. Xie Zhiqian still did not forget to look back. He frowned and said, "Xiaohua, I'm afraid he can't escape from the golden silk armor centipede. I've already said that his cultivation base is too shallow," Zhu Qinghe said coldly. "If he comes here, he'll only be a burden. He might even lose his life," Zhu Qinghe said coldly. But when he looked up, he was dumbfounded. In the distance, Xiaohua was slowly flying over. Although he looked like a baby learning to walk, he still flew over to them. Damn it, this guy is simply a cockroach, an ant that can't be dragged down. Chang Yefeng shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Senior, wait for me." Xiaohua was out of breath and raised his hand with a pale face. Then his whole body swayed, and his expression was stunned. Then he fell from the low altitude like a stone. "Ha ha ha." Chun Yi covered her mouth and laughed. "I forgot to remind him that his cultivation is shallow. He fell earlier than us." Then the four of them did not say anything more. They sat cross-legged, took out spiritual pills from their storage bags, and took them to recover their magic power and physical strength. In less than 5 minutes, Xiaohua also arrived. Seeing the four of them meditating, he did not dare to disturb them. He sat a little farther away and took some spiritual pills himself. After another incense stick of time, Zhu Qinghe stood up first and looked around. "Fellow Zhu, how long until we reach that place?" Chun Yi asked behind him. Zhu Qinghe pointed to the front and said, "It's about 2 hours from here. Last time I was near here. This mountain should be the right place." Then Zhu Qinghe looked at Chun Yi and said in surprise, "Villa Master Chun, I'm a little confused. Your invisibility, spiritual talisman, how could it be seen through by the golden silk armor centipede?" Chun Yi also shook her head. "To tell you the truth, I've been thinking about it for the past 3 days. We have been using our magic skills continuously. By right, we should have gotten rid of the golden silk armor centipede long ago. But every time, they seem to be able to find us accurately. It should be my position. I really don't understand." At this time, Xie Zhiqian and Chang Yefeng also stood up. After hearing Chun Yi's words, Chang Yefeng looked at Chun Yi thoughtfully for a while. Then he said, "I've been thinking about this for a long time. Fellow cultivator Chun, I'm afraid you don't know the way in the mountain." Why do you say that? Could it be that you found something?" Chun Yi was even more curious. Chang Yefeng said with a smile, "I'm not sure. But since Villa Master Chen asked, I'll tell you." Chun Yi was unhappy and was about to refute him. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile, "Fellow cultivator Chang, if you know something, you'd better tell me earlier." "Well, Villa Master Chun has lived in the Burial Flower Villa for a long time and has always been friends with spiritual herbs and spiritual flowers. You must have the fragrance of flowers and plants," Chang Yefeng said with a smile. "Oh, you're right." Chun Yi slapped her forehead. Although there was regret on her face, there was no regret in her eyes. Instead, she said with some pride, "I neglected this matter. Although I've used a secret method, I can't completely remove the fragrance of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. I don't know if it will affect our plan." "Fellow cultivator Chang, you're right." Zhu Qinghe nodded and said, "But there are no golden armor centipedes in front of us, so it won't affect our plan." At this time, Xiaohua also stood up and stood quietly behind them. Chang Yefeng said with a smile, "Fellow cultivator Zhu, when Mo Bao appeared, we ran away in a hurry, but we couldn't find you. We even couldn't find you outside the Mo Bao Black Forest. We were very worried. Who knew that you could come here safely? It really made us happy." Zhu Qinghe heard Chang Yefeng ask this question again. How could he not know what Chang Yefeng was thinking? He said mysteriously, "Guess where I went?" "Where?" Chun Yi was stunned. She looked at Chang Yefeng and Xie Jiqian and asked Zhu Qinghe, "I'm still in the Mo Bao Black Forest," Zhu Qinghe said with a smile, "but I can't tell you where I went." Oh, Chun Yi and the others looked a little unnatural. But Zhu Qinghe waved his hand, and a row of 3 intact Mo Bao corpses appeared in his storage bag. He said with a smile, "I've gained something. Of course, I won't forget it. These are for you." Chun Yi was pleasantly surprised. She waved her hand and put the corpses into her storage bag. She said, "It seems that fellow cultivator Zhu has gained a lot. Then I won't stand on ceremony." Zhu Qinghe smiled and didn't say much. Chang Yefeng and Xie Jiqian were also very happy. They had already put aside their questions. After all, this was Zhu Qinghe's privacy. As long as it didn't affect their plan, they were too lazy to ask more questions. Xiaohua frowned. He knew that it was not easy to get these Mo Bao corpses. He couldn't help but murmur to himself, "Damn it, is it possible that Zhu Qinghe used a secret method similar to the sky-stealing, sun-swapping to hide his cultivation? Is he more powerful than I thought?" However, Zhu Qinghe was so powerful that Xiaohua didn't dare to say anything. His goal was the heavenly ingress. He didn't care about sword spirits, sword cultivators, or sword immortals. "Let's go." Zhu Qinghe waved his hand with a smile. "There are Li Xiubai's 9 sword spirits, an immortal bright sword's flying sword in front of us. If I'm not wrong, we'll gain a lot here. These Mo Bao corpses are nothing." "Great." Chun Yi and the other 2 clapped their hands and followed Zhu Qinghe along the mountain path, ignoring Xiaohua. Xiaohua didn't say anything. He lowered his head and followed behind them. Although their magic power was restricted, they could still use their true yuan. Zhu Qinghe and the others were all gold core experts. It was easy for them to walk on the mountain path. Sure enough, after 2 hours, the mountain slowed down. The 5 of them arrived at the halfway point where the 3 mountain ranges intersected. Zhu Qinghe pointed at the thick black fog at the bottom of the valley and said with a smile, "It's here." "Here?" Chang Yefeng and the others were puzzled when they saw the black fog. He asked curiously, "Here, our divine sense and magic power are restricted. We gold core cultivators are no different from ordinary people. Even if Li Xiubai and Immortal Brightsword are nascent soul seniors, how can they use their divine sense under such circumstances? How can they push their flying swords to the extreme? How can they fight well?" This is what I said that day. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile, "I've always thought so. Their duel must be in a place where they can use their flying sword divine sense. However, this place has long been searched by the seniors, but they couldn't find any traces. It wasn't until I accidentally came here last time and saw this object in a pitch-black mountain rock that I realized." As he said this, Zhu Qinghe clapped his hands and took out a sword orb with deep cracks. "Sword orb?" Chun Yi blurted out. "Is this the 9 stars transit sword orb?" As she said this, she reached out to take it. However, Zhu Qinghe pulled his hand back with a smile and said, "This item has a peculiar texture and is heavily damaged. The sword spirit inside is also very weak, so I can't determine if it's one of the sword pellets of 9 stars transit. However, after seeing the sword orb, I'm suddenly enlightened. Li Xiubai and Immortal Bright swordsmanship has already reached a high level. The 2 of them must have had a duel in the White Sect, so there might not be any results. In order to compete, they chose a place where magic power, divine sense, or flying swords are not allowed. It's a pure duel of swordsmanship. Isn't that the best choice?" Chapter 2009. Sword Dao Has No Regrets? Chang Yefeng clapped his hands and said, "Didn't Immortal Bright Sword say that in his message? Why didn't fellow Zhu tell us about the sword pill earlier?" Chunyi looked a little embarrassed and asked, "The black fog here is very dangerous. We don't have divine thought and dharma power, so how can we go deep? Besides, everything is just fellow Zhu's guess. We don't know what's inside. How can there be a sword spirit?" Hee hee. Zhu Qinghe laughed and said, "Nothing is absolute in this world. After all, I've never been inside. Fellow Taoists, you're not 3-year-old babies. I'm afraid I don't need to explain this, right? However, since there is a sword pill here, and a very strange one at that, to tell you the truth, in the past 4 years, I went to Huan country and found some sword cultivators. I asked the Shiobai about the origin of the 9 stars soaring sun sword pill. I already know that the Changbai sect sword pill is somewhat different from others. This sword pill is the Changbai sect's disciples' sword pill. With such a clue, the answer is naturally obvious, right? This sword pill was deeply imprinted in the huge rock at that time. If I didn't fall, I might not have seen it. Well, the huge rock is over there. Fellow Taoists, you can go and take a look later." Zhu Qinghe was still smiling and said, "Where are the other 8 sword pills? If they're not damaged, in this place where divine thought and dharma power are confined, the possibility of the sword spirits of the 8 sword pills is very high, right? With such a guess, isn't it worth it for us to go in and take a look? Senior Zhu, where's the heavenly ingrass?" Xiaohua seemed to have gathered his courage and asked. Hee, it's the same. This is a place where yin and yang converge, and it's full of extreme yin. If the heavenly yin grass doesn't grow here, where can it grow? Zhu Qinghe said confidently. Moreover, to be honest, the seniors of Su Yin sect have been here before, but they didn't go deep. Therefore, I know some of the details. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked you to prepare those things. The heavenly yin grass was there in the past, but whether it's there now or not, I can't guarantee with you. Chang Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian thought for a while and nodded slightly. That's right. The guesses of the seniors of our humble sect should be similar to the ones near you. However, they probably didn't expect the 2 seniors of the Way of the Sword to abandon mana and spiritual will. How many people have failed to find this place? Even if they found it, they didn't think too much about it. They just missed the sword spirit and the other treasures for nothing. Xiaohua didn't say much. He only looked at the black fog beneath his feet, deep in thought. This was where Zhen Qing's message was. However, when he saw that the sword pellet was different from his 9 sword pellets, he knew that his sword pellet was definitely not the sword pellet of 9 stars transit the sun. At that moment, he was thinking about how to pick the heavenly yin grass and whether to find that thing that wasn't controlled by consciousness. That's strange. We can't use our divine sense and magic power here. How did Martial Uncle Zhen Qing's master know that the object wasn't controlled by divine sense? Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. By the way, fellow Zhu, you said that you have something to explain to me. What is it? Chen Yi seemed to be half believing and half doubting. Hee, not only do I have to explain to Villa Head Chun, but also to fellow Chong and fellow Xiao. Zhu Qinghe seemed to know that Chun Yi had asked this question. He clapped his hands and took out 3 jade slips, handing them to the 3 of them. He said with a smile, "Although this place restricts your divine sense, you can still read the jade slips. I won't say anything. Take a look and you will know." Okay. Chun Yi and the other 2 took the jade slips and immersed their divine senses in them. Zhu Qinghe stared at Chun Yi without blinking. Chun Yi's expression changed slightly. She raised her head and looked at Zhu Qinghe. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile, "These are the jade slips. Villa Head Chun, you don't have to be too surprised." "Yes, I know." Chun Yi's face showed a trace of suspicion. She looked at the jade slips again. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the 3 of them withdrew their divine senses. Chang Yefeng said with a bitter smile, "It turns out that the jade slips are so difficult. No wonder fellow Zhu came back empty-handed last time." Hee, if fellow Zhu didn't come back empty-handed, how could we have come this time? Xie Zhiqian said with a smile. Chun Yi also forced a smile. Fortunately, although the jade slips are difficult, with our previous preparations, We should be able to pass. Okay, let us prepare. After a while, the black mist will change, and we will be able to enter. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. He turned to Xiaohua and said, Xiaohua, this place is very dangerous. We can't take care of you. It's not too late for you to change your mind. Xiaohua took a deep breath and said, Thank you, Senior Zhu. Junior has decided to go down. Since you have decided, this old man can't say anything. Zhu Qinghe nodded. Chunyi glanced at Xiaohua and didn't say anything. Xiaohua still stood behind everyone and quietly looked at the black mist. Jin Xing's jade slips didn't explain how to break through the black mist. Perhaps Jin Xing didn't remember, or perhaps Jin Xing's master, Taoist Master Lu Peng, didn't explain. The jade slips only said that there were 4 layers under the black mist. Taoist Master Lu Peng only reached the 4th layer. Seeing that the situation was dangerous, he didn't covet anything and returned to the top of the mountain. As for the skying grass, Taoist Master Lu Peng didn't say anything. Or maybe Jin Xing didn't write anything. After the time it took to eat a meal, a light breeze suddenly appeared in the silent mountain valley. Soon after, the wind stopped and gradually became stronger. But the strange thing was that the black mist wasn't affected by the wind at all. Not to mention that it was blown away. It didn't even seem to be blown away. Woo 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 woo. The wind blew everyone's robes. Chunyi's beautiful hair fluttered in the wind. Her clothes fluttered in the wind, making her look like a goddess flying in the sky. At this moment, the instant Chun-Yi raised her head and stroked her beautiful hair, a thin crack suddenly appeared in the sky that was filled with red clouds. The golden sunlight was like a golden sword that cut through the dense black air of the ink cloud black forest and directly pierced the thick black mist under Xiaohua's feet. Immediately, the black mist was like melted black snow as it violently rolled. This rolling was like a boiling bubble that quickly complained to the surroundings of the black mist. Xiaohua could hear the sound in his ears. The black mist that didn't move at all in the wind was now being pushed by the wind. It was like a pitch-black door was being pushed open. A faintly shining mountain valley appeared in Xiaohua's vision. Quickly, Zhu Qinghe ordered, Fellow Taoists, I've already explained everything in the jade slips. We don't have much time. While the black mist is being pushed away, let's quickly enter. Chapter 2010. As he spoke, he took the lead and rushed down the mountainside along the rugged path. Although immortal Lu Peng briefly described what he saw, Xiaohua, who rushed down the black fog with the others, was slightly startled when he saw the scene in front of him. Obviously, it was beyond his expectation. Below the black fog was not a common valley, nor was it the same as above the black fog. Rather than a valley, it was better to call it cave or space. Xiaohua looked around, only to see specks of light emerging from what looked like stone walls, but also seemed like thin mist. The light illuminated the surroundings. Moreover, extremely pure spiritual qi of heaven and earth lingered in the space. Because the black fog above was pushed away, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth flowed slightly and was about to blow above Xiaohua's head. However, it only flowed for a while and set off a slight wind, then stopped. Obviously, it was suppressed by something above his head. How is it? Fellow Taoists, this is considered a cave paradise, right? Zhu Qinghe looked at the stunned expressions of the crowd and chuckled. When I came here that year, I really wanted to stay and cultivate and never go out again. Sure enough, it is a cave paradise. Such pure spiritual qi of heaven and earth is rare in other places of the Dawn Rain continent, right? Chunyi came to her senses and murmured, the spiritual herbs here are growing so vigorously, but unfortunately, they are not very old. If my burial flower manor could move here, I would never want to go out in this lifetime. Haha, Fairy Chun, Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. This place looks peaceful, but it is full of dangers. Once the ink fog is sealed, there will be no chance of survival. Only those who have been exposed to the sunlight for several hours can enter this place. Your burial flower manor has come here, and all the spiritual herbs are flourishing. Everyone is, what's the use of that? I see. Chun-Yi nodded. That's what I thought. Since the Black Fog Forest is so dangerous, how could the core area be so safe? This place is only close to the core area, but it is far from the core area. Zhu Qinghe shook his head and said, I'm afraid that only spirit-severing stage seniors can enter the core area. Fellow Taoist Zhu, I don't understand. Xie Zhiqing coughed and said, Ink sand corrodes true essence, and it also has the effect of blocking the world energy. Why is there such a rich world energy here, and not be corroded by the ink sand? I don't know the exact reason. I think it's because Mo Zhao and the Dark Forest group have blocked all the heaven and earth spiritual energy, so the heaven and earth spiritual energy is gathered here. Zhu Qinghe was a little impatient. He looked at Chun-Yi and said, Manor Lord Chun, you should first see if there are any spiritual herbs that you need. I will go with fellow Taoist Chong to see the place that leads to the lower level. Okay, since she couldn't use her divine sense here, Chun-Yi naturally had to check the plants one by one. She agreed and skipped away happily. Xie Zhiqian was not interested in the spirit grass. He also followed Zhu Qinghe and Chang Yefeng to check along the stone wall. It seemed that he was looking for something. Xiaohua understood that this was the first level of the valley. It was separated from the second level by a natural restriction. It required a special method to weaken or break the restriction in order to enter the second level. It was the same for the later levels. But for some reason, Genshin's Jade Slip didn't explain the key points in detail. It only gave a simple introduction. Xiaohua originally thought that the key point was very simple, so Genshin didn't explain it. But now, seeing the serious look on the faces of the Golden Core cultivators, how could Xiaohua not know the importance of this key point? Naturally, Xiaohua also knew that Genshin didn't expect him to come here when he was only in the foundation establishment stage. He also understood that the thing that wasn't controlled by divine sense was probably just an excuse for Genshin. The experience of condensing the golden core was the real thing that Genshin used to repay him. After thinking for a while, Xiaohua also went to check the spirit grass. After all, Zhu Qinghe didn't say which level the heavenly Yin grass was on. However, he and Chun-Yi went in the opposite direction. They started from the other side of the stone wall. The spirit grass here was just as Chun-Yi said. Although they were flourishing and some of them were relatively rare, their age wasn't too old. From time to time, senior cultivators with profound cultivation would come here to pick them. Since Chun-Yi didn't care, Xiaohua also didn't care. After searching for half a pack of cigarettes, Xiaohua had only found a few young spirit herbs that he didn't recognize and moved them into his space. At this time, just as Xiaohua straightened up and wanted to move forward, a faint light flashed from the side of the spirit grass seedling in front of him. If Xiaohua's sixth senses weren't far superior to ordinary cultivators, he might not have seen it. What is that? Xiaohua was slightly surprised and his heart trembled. Could it be a spirit beast that looks after the spirit grass? Immediately, Xiaohua became cautious and slowly walked over. However, when Xiaohua walked over, it was only an ordinary spirit grass. How could there be a spirit beast that looked after it? Xiaohua, did you pick some special spirit grass? Not far ahead, Chun-Yi unexpectedly walked over from the white mist and asked strangely, Can you fly here? Xiaohua didn't answer and looked at Chun-Yi's feet and asked instead. This is a natural restriction. Cultivators won't fall down if they walk on it. Chun-Yi pursed her lips and said with a smile, If you can fall down, would fellow Taoist Zhu still spend so much effort to find the key to go down? Junior's knowledge is shallow. I've really made Senior laugh. Xiaohua suddenly understood and pointed his finger again, saying, Junior just saw that there was a brilliance beside this spirit grass and thought it was some rare spirit grass that had a spirit beast looking after it. However, I came to take a look and found it to be very ordinary. I'm afraid Junior's eyes are playing tricks on me. Your eyes must be playing tricks on you. Chun-Yi raised her eyebrows and said with a nod, The spirit grass here is very ordinary. It's planted in my burial flower manor. Your heavenly grass definitely won't be here. You don't need to look carefully. Junior understands. Junior doesn't need Senior's help. I still want to find a few spirit grass that can be used for foundation establishment, Xiaohua said with a smile. However, without waiting for him to finish, Chun-Yi waved her hand and said, I've already looked. These spirit grass are too young and can't be used for anything. You don't need to waste your time. Soon after, she raised her head and looked into the distance. She said, Let's go. Fellow Taoist, Zhu must have found the way down by now. We'd better go there as soon as possible. Don't delay. Your cultivation level is the lowest, so you'd better follow us closely. Junior understands. Xiaohua bowed and saluted, then followed Chun-Yi in the direction Zhu Qing'e had gone. Although Xiaohua left, he was still muttering in his heart. He looked back slightly, but even after he walked far away, he still couldn't see anything unusual. This is a bit strange. Xiaohua didn't think his eyes were playing tricks on him and muttered in his heart. However, right at this moment, he heard Zhu Qing'e's laughter in front of him. Ha! As I said, the seniors of my Su Yin school have already been here before. The records in the ancient records are definitely correct. When Chun-Yi heard this, she turned her head and glanced at Xiaohua. She waved her hand and motioned for Xiaohua to follow her while she quickly walked over. After walking for about 100 feet, Xiaohua saw Zhu Qing'e and the others under a few inexplicable vines with misty, spiritual aura lingering around them. It was a thick vine with big bumps on top of each other. There were some 3-inch-long thorns on each of the bumps, which were shining with a strange red brilliance. Sky-piercing vine? When Chun-Yi saw this thing, she was a little surprised and whispered, Although this thing is called a vine, it's actually very fierce. It can devour people's essence and blood. It can even turn into a human after a long time. This thing actually still exists in the world? When Xie Zhiqian and Chang Yefeng heard this, their bodies slightly shrank and they moved further away from the sky-piercing vine. They were afraid that the sky-piercing vine would suddenly attack them. Fellow Taoists, don't panic. Zhu Qing has said with a smile, this thing is still in its infancy. It's still far from being able to hurt people. Villa Head Chun is talking about the sky-piercing vine that is hundreds of thousands of years old. That kind of monster is against the natural order. It doesn't exist in the Xiaoyu continent now. Fellow Taoist Zhu is right. That's right. Chen-Yi covered her mouth and laughed. This sky-piercing vine has another advantage. As long as it has something to rely on, it can continue to grow, no matter how high it is. The word sky-piercing comes from this. A trace of gloominess flashed across Chang Yefeng's face. He stood aside coldly, as if he was embarrassed by Chun Yi's deliberate teasing. Zhu Qing'e acted as if he didn't see it, and said with a smile, Villa Head Chun, now you know why I asked you to prepare the ice orchid bamboo. I understand. Chun-Yi nodded and said, this ice orchid bamboo is condensed by the ice orchid insect, which is the natural enemy of the sky-piercing vine. Wherever the ice orchid insect is, there will be no sky-piercing vine. Why? Xie Zhiqian asked curiously. These two don't seem to have anything to do with each other. The ice orchid insect likes fragrant and wood-type spiritual qi the most. Although the sky-piercing vine is not as attractive to the ice orchid insect as the ice orchid bamboo, if the ice orchid insect smells the scent of the sky-piercing vine, it will certainly absorb it. Chun-Yi explained with a smile. However, the sky-piercing vine is not as hard as the ice orchid bamboo. Once the ice orchid insect absorbs it, the sky-piercing vine will be corroded and all the harmful things in the vine will be swallowed by the ice orchid insect. The sky-piercing vine will also die. In addition, even if the ice orchid insect dies, the things in its corpse will still be a threat to the sky-piercing vine. So the ice orchid bamboo is the best way to deal with the sky-piercing vine. As she spoke, Chun-Yi smiled and took out an ice orchid bamboo that was more than a foot long from her storage bag and handed it to Xiaohua. Go, put this ice orchid bamboo on the sky-piercing vine. Xiaohua was slightly stunned, but he had to bite the bullet and take the ice orchid bamboo. Xiaohua, be careful. When you put the ice orchid bamboo in, it will definitely release the things in the sky-piercing vine. Don't touch those things. If it wasn't for Xiaohua, it would definitely be Xie Zhiqian who did this. Therefore, Xie Zhiqian kindly reminded Xiaohua. Chapter 2011. Thank you, Senior. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Holding the bamboo in his hand, he walked to the side of the sky-soaring vine and looked it up and down. His eyes turned slightly, then he waved his hand. It looked very casual, but the angle of insertion was very precise. With a light puff sound, the bamboo was easily inserted into the sky-soaring vine. Not a drop of poison seeped out. But at the same time, Chang Yefeng cried out in alarm and quickly dodged to the side. Xiaohua looked back in shock and saw a peach-red liquid spurting out from the bamboo toward Chang Yefeng, who was standing beside him. Oh, Senior Chang. Xiaohua saw this, and his face was full of apology. He hurriedly shouted, Junior made a mistake. Junior didn't expect this bamboo to be hollow. Puffed. Chunny covered her mouth and laughed. This bamboo is not hollow, but when it comes in contact with the juice of the sky-soaring vine, the texture in the center will quickly melt. Buzz, buzz. Just when Chang Yefeng was angry and wanted to hit Xiaohua with his hand, he heard a loud roar in the valley. Looking at the sky-soaring vine in front of Xiaohua, it began to gradually tremble, shaking the nearby stone wall. The bamboo that was inserted into the sky-soaring vine began to slowly melt and merge into the wound of the sky-soaring vine. Let's hide aside. Zhu Qinghe didn't understand and hurriedly retreated to the side. The sky-soaring vine began to twist, like a snake's tail being stepped on. The peach-red juice of the sky-soaring vine also spilled out in the air. The sky-soaring vine swayed for a moment, then slowly twitched again and gradually shrank down along the stone wall. When the sky-soaring vine disappeared, revealing a hole the size of several people, Xiaohua immediately understood that Zhu Qinghe and the others were planning to do this. Xiaohua, you go down first. Zhu Qinghe ordered without hesitation. Yes, Junior will go down first. Xiaohua responded, walked to the hole, and poked his head out to take a look. This was the same stone wall as the first floor. There was nothing special about it. Xiaohua sized it up and jumped down. However, just as his figure landed on the precipitous part of the stone wall, he heard a gust of wind. A black shadow flashed past and whipped towards Xiaohua's head from the top. Xiaohua's transcendence energy is completely depleted, but he still has his fists and kicks. He waved his hand, wanting to block the shadow. But when he glanced over, he realized that the black shadow was actually the gigantic sky-reaching vine from before. Numerous sharp thorns were piercing towards him. Moreover, the whooshing sound of the wind indicated that the vines were extremely powerful. Xiaohua waved his hand. Originally, he wanted to take out the Great Wisdom Sword. However, his hand only moved slightly before stopping. His feet moved slightly as he used the ethereal steps. His figure flashed to the left and easily dodged the sky-soaring vine. Pong! The sky-reaching vines hit the stone wall. Dozens of tiny holes appeared on the hard stone wall. It was obviously the work of those thorns. Wu, the sky-reaching vine, was actually extremely nimble. Using the counterattack force from the stone wall, it turned horizontally and struck towards Xiaohua's waist. Xiaohua frowned slightly. Without waiting for the vines to reach him, he jumped into the air and somersaulted just in time to dodge the vines. The shiny thorns barely scratched Xiaohua's waist. However, this wasn't the end of it. While Xiaohua's figure was still in the air, a dozen or so vines that were attached to the stone wall shook and swung towards Xiaohua from all directions. Damn it, Xiaohua cursed in his heart. He looked at the hole from the side. Zhu Qinghe and the other three did not appear. Clearly, they were waiting. Forget it, Xiaohua sneered. His figure moved, and he used the ethereal steps. It seemed that he did not use his magic power, but relied on the strength of his body to escape into the distance. The second floor was somewhat different from the first floor. It seemed that the space was much larger. The natural restriction under Xiaohua's feet made it soft to step on. It was no different from stepping on grass. Following Xiao Hua's escape, the sky-reaching vine was like a giant hand baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. It chased after him and swayed. After half a cup of tea's time, Xie Qian poked his head out of the hole. Seeing that there was no movement, he shouted, "Manor Lord Chun, wait for a while." Xiao Hua has lured the sky-reaching vine away. Zhu Qinghe and the others jumped down. Looking at the nearby tranquility and listening to the sound of collision in the distance, the four of them were calm. "Actually, we should let Xiao Hua know the situation," Chang Yefeng said in a low voice. "At least he could be prepared." Zhu Qinghe narrowed his eyes and said, "This place is very dangerous. I have already told him. If he wants to come here, I can't do anything about it. But I only prepared 3 jade slips. With one more, there will be more danger of it being leaked. Could it be that the 3 of you are not afraid that the Changbai sect or the Flame Bamboo Sword sect will come after you? Don't say so many useless things." Chun Yi said calmly, "Let's quickly find the way to the 3rd floor. If Xiao Hua can come back safely, the sky-reaching grass is on the 3rd floor. Why don't we just let him pick it? Isn't this what he wants?" "Exactly." Zhu Qinghe nodded. He looked around and waved his hand. He quickly walked in a direction. Chun Yi and the others did not hesitate to follow. This time, no one looked in Xiao Hua's direction. As for Xiao Hua, his figure was fluttering as he fled. Once he was far away, he reckoned that Zhu Qinghe and the others wouldn't be able to see him. With a wave of his hand, the great wisdom heavy sword appeared in his hand. His figure leapt up and casually swung it. With a light schwa sound, the sky-soaring vines were easily cut off by the heavy sword. With a pu sound, the peach-colored liquid sprayed out and filled the sky. Xiao Hua was not afraid at all. He had already calculated the angle. His figure flashed and dodged the juice. Then, he jumped up again and nimbly cut off several more vines. Woo-woo! Another gust of wind blew. The sky-soaring vines retreated. Although the remaining vines did not retreat, they still swayed in the distance and did not come closer. "Oomph!" Xiao Hua coldly snorted. He raised his head and took a look. Then, with quick steps, he ran towards a small cave on the stone wall. After waiting for Xiao Hua's figure to disappear into the cave, those sky-soaring vines finally slowly retracted back, landing on some unknown stone wall. The sky-soaring vine was not weak. Not only was it fast, but it was also extremely sharp and poisonous. It could even swallow a cultivator's liquid. This was especially true in this place where one's divine sense and dharma power were restricted. Regardless of whether it was Chang Yefeng, Chen Yi, or even Zhu Qinghe, they might not be able to dodge the sky-soaring vine so easily. Unfortunately, the sky-soaring vine met Xiao Hua, a strong martial artist. It had to be said that this was a tragedy for the sky-soaring vine and a comedy for Zhu Qinghe and the others. Chapter 2012. I'll rest here for a while first. Xiao Hua hid in the cave and laughed coldly. It won't be too late for me to go after you've found the path to the 3rd floor. Or perhaps you all can go in first. I'll be a fisherman. But at this moment, Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. How can I use my divine sense in the cave? Of course, the cave wasn't very deep. It was only about 10 feet deep. Xiao Hua was currently sitting in the middle of the cave. His divine sense was naturally probing the inside of the cave. Although his divine sense couldn't extend very far, it was clearly much stronger than when he was in the valley. This is Limian stone? Xiao Hua's divine sense landed on the stone wall, and he shockingly discovered that there was actually a piece of refining material inside. Great! Xiao Hua was overjoyed upon seeing this. He didn't care about meditating and cultivating qi. He jumped up from the ground and released his Buddhist sense, examining it bit by bit. After he finished looking, he unconsciously stretched out the stone and said to himself, "Good. This cave isn't long, but there are a lot of refining materials inside. Although they aren't too rare, if I were to search for them in the auction, wouldn't I have to spend a lot of spirit stones? Now I actually have all of them. It's really not bad." Xiao Hua immediately calmed down his angry thoughts. He picked up the great wisdom sword and became a miner, digging out the materials that he could see with his Buddhist sense one by one and storing them into his space. Alas, everything is good here, but unfortunately there's no Qian Mo stone. And this place should be like what Zhu Cheng has said. It's the place where the spiritual energy of ink shadow black forest gathers. A lot of materials are formed because of the pressure of ink sand. It can be said that there are a lot of rare materials in the entire mountain range. Xiao Hua thought as he put away all the materials he could get his hands on. He clapped his hands and sat down. But immediately after, Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and laughed. Damn it, this young master is stupid. This cave is probably where those nascent soul and even spirit-severing cultivators come to look for refining materials, right? The materials that I picked were probably left here by those seniors who disdained to use them, right? This is bad. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was suddenly startled. Since there are so many caves here, then perhaps the passage to the third floor is inside one of the caves. This young master only cares about resting here. If those shameless seniors think that this young master has died and enter the third level without waiting for this young master, then wouldn't this young master's heavenly ingress be lost? Forget it. For Shui Shui's sake, I'll endure it for now. Xiao Hua thought and didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly ran out of the cave and returned along the route he had just escaped. Xiao Hua ran for a moment, but he heard a sound not too far ahead. He could not help but be delighted. Senior Zhu, this kid is here. However, when he finished shouting, the sound in front of him disappeared again. No one answered him. Is it Senior Zhu? Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback. With a wave of his hand, the great wisdom-heavy sword appeared in his hand. Step by step, he walked forward. However, even when he walked to the front of the cave, he still did not see a single person. Strange, what's wrong with me today? Xiao Hua scratched his head. Why am I always so suspicious? Just when Xiao Hua was bewildered, a slightly thin sky soaring vine shot out from under Xiao Hua's feet. Like a poisonous snake, it coiled around Xiao Hua. I was wondering, so it's just this thing? Xiao Hua did not even think. With a wave of his hand, he actually chopped the sky soaring vine into several pieces. Xiao Hua himself also quickly dodged and hid in the cave. The sky's soaring vine seemed to be in pain. It swayed and actually rushed into the cave, wanting to swallow Xiao Hua. It's really something delivered to my doorstep. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. His figure quickly rushed to the entrance of the cave. With a light wave of his hand, he actually cut off the sky-soaring vine that was several feet long. Then, with a wave of his hand, he did not touch the sky-soaring vines and stored them into the space. Within the space, in an extremely distant place, other than the mountain of Mo Zhao's corpse, there was even more than these corpses. Blackwood. These blackwood were all extremely thick and long. Alas, not to mention the sky-eating grass. Just these things alone made Xiao Hua's trip to Mo Zhao's black forest worthwhile. The sky-soaring vine that had its vines chopped off by Xiao Hua one after another was really scared at this time. With a rustling sound, it pulled back its vines and did not dare to show its face again. Xiao Hua also casually dug out several pieces of refining materials before leisurely coming out of the cave. Thank you, Senior. Thank you, Senior. Xiao Hua ran to the entrance of the cave from the first floor to the second floor and shouted. Unfortunately, no one responded. Damn it, Xiao Hua was somewhat helpless. He looked left and right, then his gaze fell on the ground and smiled. He saw that there were some spiritual herbs on the ground, but at this time, some of them had fallen. It was the traces of someone walking past. Although it was not obvious, Xiao Hua could still distinguish it. These gold core cultivators. Xiao Hua shook his head. Although they are very old and their cultivation is profound, they have been interacting with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth since they were young. They are associated with divine sense. Suddenly losing these divine abilities, they seem to be no different from ordinary people. Suddenly, Xiao Hua thought again. In this place, this young master's strength directly suppressed the four of them. If this young master is angry, won't the four of them lose their lives? Why should this young master be so timid? Just directly subdue them and bring this young master to pick the heavenly grass. Or let Chinny pick it for this young master. Wouldn't that be better? Unless I kill them all here. Xiaohua immediately put away this baseless thought. Otherwise, if this young master leaves the ink Zhao Black Forest, will this young master still be alive? Following the faint traces on the stone wall, Xiaohua really found the front of the cave. However, this cave was obviously different from the other caves Xiaohua had seen before. There was a thick fog in the cave, and he could not see clearly inside. Senior Zhu, Manor Lord Chun, Xiaohua did not dare to release his divine sense, and also did not dare to rashly enter. He could only shout softly, Xiaohua, you're still alive? Xie Zhiqian's voice sounded from the side of the cave. Yes, it is this junior. Xiaohua smiled and cupped his hands. Senior Xie, have you not gone down yet? And I am waiting. Xie Zhiqian's figure appeared from the fog, with a short sword in his hand. The time is not right. The entrance to the third floor has not appeared yet. You came at the right time. You stay here and guard. I will go in and take a look. Yes. Xiaohua nodded and entered the cave. He stood at the place where Xie Zhiqian was guarding. Not long after, Zhu Qinghe walked out and sized up Xiaohua. He frowned and said, Xiaohua, how did you escape from the sky soaring vine? How did you find this place? All right, I will let Senior Zhu know. Xiaohua bowed and said, after this junior lured the sky soaring vine away, I happened to find a cave on the stone wall and quickly hid inside. The cave was very long, and the sky soaring vine could not penetrate it. This junior waited for a while, but there were no more sky soaring vines, so I came out. And you are quite clever. Zhu Qinghe raised his eyebrows and nodded slightly. There are many similar caves on the stone wall. How did you find them? After Xiaohua explained the reason, Zhu Qinghe frowned again and looked at the ground outside the stone wall. It was as Xiaohua said. Alas, the ancients are right. Pay attention to everything and learn. Zhu Qinghe shook his head and said, this old man calculated and calculated to cover up his tracks, but I never thought that I would make such a big mistake. Fortunately, there are few people here. Otherwise, we would have been discovered. Senior Zhu, Xiaohua's heart moved and said, when this junior was on the first floor, I seemed to have seen some brilliance, and I also seemed to have heard some movement, but what? Zhu Qinghe raised his eyebrows and rushed out. He looked around for a long time, then frowned and asked, are you sure? Of course this junior can't be sure. Otherwise, I would have already told the seniors. Xiaohua shook his head. Well, there's usually no one in the core area of the Ink Cloud Black Forest. Moreover, the cultivators who come here are all nascent soul stage seniors. They won't be so sneaky. Zhu Qinghe nodded and said, the movements you mentioned are probably caused by the sky climbing vine, right? And this junior thinks so too. Because I was attacked by another vine, this junior had no choice but to hide in the cave again. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. At this moment, Chun Yi's voice sounded from inside the cave. Fellow Taoist Zhu, there is movement. Come quickly. Xiaohua, you come too. Zhu Qinghe waved his hand and said, follow me to the third floor. There should be sky grass there. You can pick it yourself. Thank you, Senior Zhu. Xiaohua quickly bowed and carefully followed Zhu Qinghe into the cave. This cave was actually very long. Moreover, there were some natural bends inside. However, fortunately, there were no forks. Zhu Qinghe and Xiaohua walked for a moment and reached the end of the cave. At the end of the cave was a space of several zhang. At the bottom of the space was a clear spring. The spring was about 1 zhang wide. Around the spring, on the stone walls, there were many spiritual herbs. These spiritual herbs were not pure white and looked like they were carved out of ice and jade. Before Xiaohua could get close, a chill rushed over him. Xiaohua couldn't help but shiver. This is a fire spirit pill. Take one. Zhu Qinghe didn't turn around. With a flick of his hand, a green bean-sized pill was thrown to Xiaohua. Thank you, Senior. Xiaohua took the pill and hesitated for a moment before opening his mouth and swallowing it. Sure enough, A stream of heat flowed out from his dantian as he swallowed the fire spirit pill. Soon after, it flowed through his limbs and bones, and the chill gradually faded away. How is the reaction of the ice spring? Zhu Qinghe asked in a low voice. There was a slight tremor just now. There was a ripple in the center of the ice spring. However, it only lasted for a moment before it calmed down. Chen Yi said in a low voice. Her gaze swept past Xiaohua's face. It's good that there was a tremor. The ancient records say that there are 9 tremors. After 9 tremors, we will have a chance. Zhu Qinghe turned to look at Xie Zhiqian. In a moment, I will have to ask fellow Daoist Xie to make a move. Chapter 2013. Well said. Xie Zhiqian nodded. I've been itching to try for a long time. Hee. Zhu Qinghe laughed and turned his attention back to the ice spring. Why can't I use my divine sense here? Xiaohua tried to use his Buddhist sense and divine sense, but they couldn't leave his body. It's completely different from the cave just now. Villa Master Chun, these spirit herbs look very rare. Xiaohua looked at the spirit herbs above the ice spring and couldn't help but whisper. I also want to pick them. Chun Yi snorted unhappily. Unfortunately, we don't have divine sense or magic power, so we can't use the picking technique. These spirit herbs are born from the ice spring's extreme, spiritual energy. If we touch them with our flesh and blood, not only will we be immediately contaminated, we won't be able to use them. If it's serious, we'll immediately turn into spiritual energy, and our bodies will also be injured. She glanced at Xiaohua and teased. How about you go and pick them? Xiaohua heard and shook his head. Senior doesn't dare to take the risk. How can Junior dare? It's better to be honest. However, Xiaohua was calculating in his heart how to find a time when the 4 of them weren't paying attention and use his divine sense to take these spirit herbs into his space. After a few breaths, the center of the ice spring began to tremble slightly, as if a needle had pierced it. Ripples spread out in succession and quickly spread in all directions. Xiaohua saw it clearly, and his eyes turned rapidly. This was really strange, because there wasn't any movement nearby. Soon after, the trembling became even more intense, each time faster than the previous one. After the 9th time, the entire ice spring suddenly began to boil. One by one, thumb-sized bubbles formed in the middle of the ice spring and quickly spurted out. Waves of extremely cold air rushed into the air and landed on the white sparkling spirit grass on the stone wall. Right now, hearing Zhu Qinghe's soft reprimand, Xie Zhiqian reached into his bosom and took out a fiery red pill. He raised his head and swallowed it. Then, a trace of dark red appeared on his face. Then, his left hand activated magic power and a spell was formed. Immediately after, Xie Zhiqian pulled his right hand again and untied the storage bag at his waist. With a shake of his hand, a fiery red flame flew out from the storage bag. It was a fist-sized Firebat King. When Xie Zhiqian saw the Firebat King come out, he struck the center of the cold spring with his left hand. Walala! The sound of ice sealing was heard, and a few wisps of white flames appeared above the cold spring. The Firebat King circled around Lung Quan a few times in the air. It squeaked angrily and rushed towards Lung Quan. The Firebat King's squeaking sound wasn't very loud, but in Xiaohua's ears, there was a burst of ringing in his ears. Even his brain felt waves of pain. This pain was extremely similar to the pain he had felt when refining the jade blood pill, but it was much lighter in comparison. Xiaohua only frowned slightly, not caring about it at all. Looking at the many bubbles above the cold spring, under the Firebat King's squeaking sounds, they all popped one after another. Even the dozen or so white spirit herbs on the stone wall began to crack. In the end, they gradually broke apart and fell into the cold spring. Just as the Firebat King was halfway there at the center of the cold spring, where the bubble had burst, there was another vibration that was 10 times stronger than before. This time, it was even stronger, and it formed a deep concave shape. When the Firebat King rushed into the concave shape, 100 times stronger vibration was generated in the cold spring. Finally, with a bang, the entire cold spring suddenly disappeared. A hole about 10 feet wide appeared in front of Xiaohua and the others. Waves of cold air rushed out from the hole. "Let's go," Zhu Qinghe growled. He took the lead and jumped into the hole. Chun Yi and the others also followed without hesitation. On the other hand, Xiaohua hesitated slightly. He looked up at the few white spiritual herbs and sighed. He also jumped down, seemingly a little regretful. With a chi sound, Xiaohua only felt a slight blur in front of his eyes. Before he could see the situation in front of him clearly, his feet slipped and his whole body suddenly fell down. Ouch! Xiaohua was shocked. He slapped his hand, wanting to use the force to reverse his body and maintain his balance. However, the place where his hand fell was strangely cold and smooth. It was as if there was no force at all. Thus, Xiaohua's whole body curled up and slid down along the smooth surface. At this time, Xiaohua could clearly see that this was a slanted slope. The slope was completely formed from transparent ice. This ice was incomparably hard and smooth. Not only was Xiaohua sliding down the slope, but the 4 people who had entered before were also sliding down. It was just that they had slid down a bit further. Damn it! Xiaohua was slightly stunned. Immortal Liu Peng didn't seem to have mentioned such a difficult place, right? Or Martial Uncle Jin Qing didn't write it down? Although the slope was incomparably smooth, it wasn't long. Xiaohua quickly slid down to the bottom of the valley. Zhu Chenghe and the others had already climbed up and hid at the side. Seeing that everyone was in the same sorry state as him, Xiaohua secretly laughed. However, he didn't dare to say anything. He tidied up his Taoist robe and obediently stood at the side. However, Xiaohua's eyes didn't stay idle. They looked around randomly, trying to find the whereabouts of the heavenly Yin grass. He saw that this was a narrow, slanted valley. It was completely formed by transparent ice. He didn't know how thick the transparent ice was, but he could faintly see the reflection of everyone. In this frozen valley, he didn't see any greenery. Instead, there were some things that were similar to the spiritual herbs above the cold spring. They grew on the steep ice valley. Yeah, it's easy to come down, but difficult to go up. Xiaohua sighed and looked at the slope that he came down from. In a situation where he didn't have any magic power, going up from here was really strenuous. However, since Zhu Qinghe and the others came prepared, Xiaohua didn't think too much. If they could go up, Xiaohua naturally could too. Wait a moment, let me take a look. At this moment, Zhu Qinghe's face was somewhat dignified. All 4 sides here are the same. It's very difficult to distinguish the direction. According to the sect's ancient records, it's very special. Oh, it's over there, Zhu Qinghe said as he looked around. It was unknown what he saw, but he pointed at an ice wall and said. Xiaohua was curious. He looked for a long time, but he couldn't find any clues. He couldn't help but secretly shake his head. Zhu Qinghe led everyone towards the ice wall with great difficulty. They were really slipping 3 times with each step. They were in an extremely sorry state. The faces of these gold, core, and foundation establishment cultivators had already been smashed countless times here. Seeing the ice wall in front of them, the strange thing was that although it was clearly a solid ice wall, when they walked in front of it, it was actually just a shadow, a reflection of the ice wall on the other side. Chapter 2014. When Zhu Qinghe walked past the ice wall, Xiaohua was dumbstruck by the scene in front of him. On the other side of the ice wall was another slanted stone wall. However, it was covered in red lava. There was even dark red lava quietly flowing on it. This scene was no different from the flame forest mountains. Looking at the middle of the 2 stone walls, there was an open area about 10 feet wide. It was flourishing with flowers and lush with spirit herbs. The verdant vegetation formed a green barrier, dividing the fiery red and snow white into 2. Heavenly Yin grass. Xiaohua looked over and found the heavenly Yin grass in the center of the spiritual herbs. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Don't be anxious," Zhu Qinghe said in a low voice, This is the intersection of yin and yang. Two different kinds of spiritual energy of heaven and earth are mixed here. It is very strange. According to the records of the sect, there is a two-headed spirit snake breeding here. Two-headed spirit snake? Xiaohua thought for a moment and understood. The nature of the two-headed spirit snake was lustful. One of them was yang, while the other was yin. The toxicity of the two snakes was naturally divided into yin and yang. If one was bitten by only one snake, it would be dangerous. If one was bitten by two snakes at the same time, the yin and yang snake venom would work together. Even a nascent soul and spirit severing cultivator would have a hard time keeping their life. Martial Uncle Jinqing, this is a matter of life and death. Why didn't you record it down? Xiaohua laughed bitterly in his heart. I promised Manor Lord Chun to let her pick a few more spiritual herbs. Therefore, I made some preparations. Zhu Qing has said, however, my methods are not good enough. I can only confuse the two-headed snake for a few breaths. Xiaohua, if you want to pick the heavenly yin grass, you have to be faster. Thank you, senior. Xiaohua let out a big breath. He was very glad that he was able to come. Otherwise, with Chun Yi's personality and temper, how could she waste time on spiritual herbs that were unrelated to her? Wait a moment. Wait for my command. Zhu Qinghe cautiously walked close to the green barrier and didn't dare to move forward. With a clap of his hand, he took out a crimson incense stick from his bosom. He twirled it with his 2 fingers, and a thin wisp of smoke came out of it. The smoke was also strange. After rising about a foot into the air, it began to dissipate in circles. Zhu Qinghe waved his hand, and the incense stick landed in front of his feet at the edge of the green barrier. Then he reached into his robes and took out 2 bronze willow leaves. He carefully placed them near the incense stick. Then Zhu Qinghe quietly walked to the other side of the incense stick, and Chun Yi and the others followed him. Shoo! Zhu Qinghe whispered, this celestial silkworm phase is made from a kind of fragrant silkworm excrement, which attracts poisonous insects the most. The thin silk leaves are also the favorite of the double-headed snake. Thin silk gene? Chun Yi exclaimed in a low voice. Fellow Taoist Zhu, is this the legendary thin thread gene that can paralyze Mo Zhao for 10 breaths? Yes, that's right, this is it. Zhu Qinghe lowered his voice and said, if we want to pass through here, we have to face the double-headed snake. If we had magical power, everything would be easy. But now we can only do this. Then he glanced at Xiaohua and said, although the thin silk leaves can paralyze Mo Zhao for 10 breaths, it may not be able to paralyze the double-headed snake for 10 breaths. But I don't know how much it can paralyze the double-headed snake. Anyway, we don't need to pick up the spiritual herbs. We just need to pass through here, and a few breaths will be enough. Villa Master Chun and Xiaohua, you have to be careful. Shoo! Over there, the double-headed snake is coming out. Zhu Qinghe stopped talking and pointed his finger. Sure enough, in the middle of the green barrier where Zhu Qinghe was, there was a rustling sound coming from the green grass, and the spiritual herbs swayed slightly. Then, a red and white snake, about a foot long and as thick as a chopstick, raised its head from the spiritual herbs. Sure enough, it had 2 heads. One of them was so white that it was almost transparent, while the other was as red as fire. The eyes on both heads were pitch black, and the 2 snake tongues were rapidly flicking in and out of the snakes' mouths. Moreover, the 2 tongues were looking in the direction of Zhu Qinghe and the others. They were even swimming toward Zhu Qinghe and the others. Hiss! Xie Zhiqian took a breath of cold air and moved back a little. Then he saw Zhu Qinghe standing there motionlessly, and his face was slightly red. He saw the double-headed snake swim to the edge of the green barrier, and it seemed to be afraid of the ice on this side. It hesitated for a moment, then stopped and spat out its tongue at Zhu Qinghe and the others with a hissing sound. Zhu Qinghe only calmly watched and didn't move. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the double-headed snake suddenly turned its head as if it had smelled the heavenly silkworm fragrance. It very excitedly twisted its 2 heads and swam over at an extremely fast speed, In about 5 breaths of time, it reached the side of the thin strands. 5 breaths of time. If the thin strands had 5 or even 8 breaths of time, they would have enough time to pick a few spiritual herbs. Xiaohua secretly calculated while watching. Facing the 2 thin strands, the double-headed snake actually had enough vigilance. It didn't immediately swallow the 2 leaves like Xiaohua had thought. Instead, it stretched out its snake head and carefully looked. It even turned its head and looked in the direction of Xiaohua and the others. Then, it swallowed the thin strands into its stomach. Let's go. Seeing that the double-headed snake had swallowed the thin thread, its upright snake head became slightly limp. Both snake heads crawled, and its pitch-black snake eyes closed. Zhu Qinghe let out a low roar. He took the lead and strode into the green spirit grass. Then, he ran towards the opposite side of the spirit grass that was 1 zhang away. Xiaohua had already prepared his power. When he heard Zhu Qinghe's voice, he rushed towards the heavenly yin grass. Although he had already concealed it, the ethereal steps was unknowingly used. Like moving clouds and flowing water, he easily arrived in front of the heavenly yin grass. Then, with a wave of his hand, the devil spear's tip appeared in his hand. Swish, swish, swish. Not only was the heavenly yin grass uprooted, but the other spiritual herbs beside it were also pulled out along with the soil. Then, Xiaohua waved his hand, and the spiritual herbs were stored into the space. At this time, Zhu Qinghe and the others had already run to the edge of the green barrier. Xiaohua slightly tilted his head. When he looked at the double-headed snake had already gradually stood upright and turned its head to look at them. Io, it's actually only 4 breaths. Xiaohua was startled. He didn't have time to pick up the other spiritual herbs. His feet slipped, and he ran behind Zhu Qinghe and the others. Behind him, the double-headed snake was swimming rapidly among the spiritual herbs. It was really like lightning as it rushed toward Xiaohua. Xiaohua's ethereal steps was really powerful. Although he was still some distance away from the green barrier, his figure was like a wisp of smoke, swaying above the spiritual herbs. In a few breaths, he reached the edge. Just as his feet left the barrier, the double-headed snake pounced. The 2 snake heads stretched out and bit the place where Xiaohua's heels had just left. Good. Zhu Qinghe couldn't help but shout. Chun Yi, who was beside Xiaohua, was also gasping for breath as she escaped from the barrier at the same time as Xiaohua. However, Xiaohua was blocking in front of her, so the double-headed snake didn't attack Chun Yi. Phew! Xiaohua let out a long breath and patted his chest. Chun Yi's face was also deathly pale as she stroked her towering chest. Xiaohua, your movement technique is somewhat strange. It seems somewhat similar to the so-called innate martial Tao of the Dawn Rain continent. Zhu Qinghe asked with a slight frown. Good, I'll let Senior Zhu know, Xiaohua said with a smile. Before this junior refined qi, I had indeed practiced martial arts for a few days. I didn't expect that I would actually be able to use it here. Oh, so that's how it is. Zhu Qinghe nodded and seemed to be somewhat pensive. I didn't expect that you still had a trick up your sleeve. Chun Yi sneered at the side. I only picked a stalk of silver feather flower. Not only did you pick the skying grass, you even picked the harmony grass and the twin fruit. Your harvest is quite bountiful. Hee. Xiaohua laughed and clapped his hands. He took out a spiritual herb that he didn't recognize and handed it to Chun Yi, saying this junior was just passing by and gave it to Villa Master Chun. Many thanks to Villa Master Chun for giving this junior this opportunity. And that's more like it. Chun Yi took the spiritual herb and said with a smile, Xiaohua understands martial arts. This is actually good news. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. It will be of great use in a while. Xiaohua's heart gave birth to a trace of a bad feeling. However, he could only brace himself and say, this junior's seniors have helped a lot. If I can help, this junior will do his best to help. Of course you have to do your best. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. We have been preparing for several years. You have benefited greatly by following us. How can you not do your best? Then, he turned to Chang Yefeng and said, Fellow Daoist Chang, Now that we are here, it should be time for you to receive it." Chang Yefeng nodded and glanced around the lava. He frowned and said, "My fellow cultivator Zhu, you didn't say that we couldn't use our magic power and spiritual thoughts in this place. Therefore, I took the heavenly mirror without hesitation. However, this area is very wide. Without the support of magic power and divine sense, how can I find the hidden cave?" Clear sky mirror. These three words were like thunder in Xiao Hua's ears. However, after the thunder passed, Xiao Hua's mind was blank again. It seemed that he couldn't remember anything at all. This young master seems to have a magic tool called the clear sky mirror before. This magic tool, is this young master's? Where did Chang Yefeng get this young master's magic tool? Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at Chang Yefeng. It seemed that Chang Yefeng was his enemy. Heh. Zhu Qinghe heard Chang Yefeng's words and only laughed. He said, "Of course I know there are some difficulties. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found fellow Taoist Chang, right? In fact, there are many magic tools similar to the clear sky mirror on the Donrain continent. Fellow Taoist Chang was the first person I thought of. Perhaps it's fate between fellow Taoist Chang and the sword spirit?" Okay. Chang Yefeng clapped his hands and took out a square magic tool about 1 foot in size. He smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhu, you'd better find a smaller area." "No problem. Fellow Taoists, please follow me," Zhu Qinghe said and led the group to the right. At this moment, there was a man and a woman standing beside the ice spring that Xiao Hua and the others used to enter the 3rd level. Chapter 2015. There were 2 cultivators beside the cold spring. The man was tall and thin, with bright eyes and sword-like eyebrows. The lines on his face were as if they were carved by a knife. He was abnormally stern. The woman had a graceful figure, delicate features, and a heroic spirit. She was far from being comparable to Chun Yi's bearing. The 2 people stood there very straight. Although they were not on guard, there was a kind of coldness and a kind of sword intent on their bodies. They were like 2 sharp swords that had been unsheathed. It seemed that they were not inferior to the coldness that had rushed into the space. These 2 people were actually swordsman Duan Yuming and Wang Xiuyao from the Huan country's Huan sword sect. However, at this time, the sword intent on their bodies was much more restrained than when they first came from the Huan country to the Ming country. It was obviously the result of their great improvement in cultivation. The 2 people seemed to have stood there for a long time. Wang Xiuyao was a little impatient. She looked at the hole where the cold spring disappeared and said in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Brother, I'm afraid they have already gone. They won't be guarding inside. We should go in early. Otherwise, if we lose track of them, we will have come in vain." "Junior Marshal's sister, don't be anxious." Duan Yuming stared at the coldness in the hole and frowned slightly. He said calmly, "When we entered the 2nd layer just now, we were a little careless. We were actually discovered by that Foundation establishment brat. Although he didn't find our tracks, he must have already told those gold core cultivators. Although they didn't come out to look for us, I'm afraid they have already set up a trap under this hole and are waiting for us to fall. Let's wait a little longer." "Humph. We should have killed that little Foundation establishment stage cultivator with a single sword strike. He's just a shield. Just now, he lured the sky-piercing vine away and was lucky enough to escape. If we kill him, those golden core stage cultivators won't necessarily know." Wang Xiuyao said coldly. "That little Foundation establishment brat's hands and feet are not weak. There's a hint of sword Dao. Our sword origin is restricted. If we are careless and leak our tracks, we will wake up those gold core cultivators. Wouldn't all our previous efforts be wasted?" Duan Yuming shook his head slightly. They're just a few gold core cultivators. Just kill them all." Wang Xiuyao was still unconvinced. "We've killed more than 1 or 2 Jindan stage cultivators in the past few years in the cultivation world. Now that we've entered the 3rd grade of the illusory sword realm, wouldn't killing a few Jindan stage cultivators be as easy as lifting a finger?" Duan Yuming stared at the spirit herbs in front of him thoughtfully. Then he replied, "Sword cultivator sword cultivator, it's true that we improve through battles. If we were in Huan Kingdom, unless we were fighting with millions of Meng mountains, how could we improve our cultivation base so quickly? However, it is precisely because we have killed so many cultivators that I fear some nascent soul cultivators will want to kill us. No way. Wang Xiao was slightly taken aback. We were extremely careful when we killed them. If they were from a big sect, we definitely wouldn't provoke them. Only small sects would make a move. Moreover, once we made a move, we definitely wouldn't leave anyone alive. It's impossible for them to have a hold on us. Besides, would those nascent soul cultivators dare to attack us? Aren't you afraid of incurring the enmity of us sword cultivators? Wang Shuyao said disdainfully. That's true. Duan Yuming laughed. They're probably afraid of harming us. Bah, you're the rat. Wang Shuyao spat and scolded jokingly. A hint of sweetness appeared on Duan Yuming's face. He didn't retort, but explained again, it's not that I don't want to kill those golden core cultivators. Look at this hole and the spirit herbs beside it. It must be some powerful restriction. We don't know anything about this place, but they've been preparing for several years. Why don't we let them lead the way? When they find Senior Li Xiaobai's 9 stars transverse sun sword spirit, wouldn't it be better for us to be the mantises chasing after the cicadas? Bah, senior brother, why don't we be the Oriole? Wang Xiao spat a few more times and said. Duan Yuming smiled foolishly. Junior sister, whatever you say. Wang Xiao looked at the hole under her feet and sneered again. These cultivators are really delusional. Although we're all sword cultivators, how can the sword spirit of us, sword cultivators, compare to the flying swords of cultivators? They're indulging in fantasy. Can they practice flying swords just because they obtain the sword spirit? Can they have the attack of us, sword cultivators? Can they compete with us, sword cultivators? That's true. Duan Yuming smiled apologetically. How would they know that the sword spirit is loyal to the person who nurtured it? It's useless for others to take it. The most precious thing that Senior Li Xiaobai left here isn't the 9 sword spirits, but his 9 stars transverse sun sword intent. Cultivators only know about magic power. How would they know about sword intent? Even if they obtain Senior Li Xiaobai's sword pill, they can't get the sword intent in it. Wang Shuyao said coldly. They can only let the sword pill gather dust, casting pearls before swine. That's right. Duan Yuming's handsome face was filled with respect. The seniors of Flame Bamboo Sword Sect searched for a long time in Meng, but they didn't expect Senior Li Xiaobai's sword pill to land in Shi. If not for us being lucky and hearing someone asking about the refinement of the sword pill, we wouldn't have been able to find out that these little golden core cultivators were actually coveting Senior Li Xiaobai's sword pill. The problem is that they really found the location of the sword pill. Wang Xiao nodded. And the place that they found was exactly the same as the place that the seniors of Xian Sword Sect had predicted. Now that we've met them and followed them for so many years, we can't help but say that it's fate. It's Senior Li Xiaobai's spirit in heaven that protected us. Duan Yuming echoed. This 9 stars transverse sun sword intent still belongs to the sword cultivators of my Huan country. Naturally, if not for Senior Li Xiaobai's spirit in heaven, how would we have accidentally searched that foundation establishment female cultivator's soul that day? Wang Xuyao's face showed a trace of excitement. If not for the soul search, how would we know that this cultivator called Zhu Qinghe was looking for the refinement method of the sword pill? If not for finding this Zhu Qinghe, how would we have followed him to Flame Bamboo Sword Sect? I believe that this guy still hasn't thought that the one who told him the refinement method of the sword pill was this sword arrangement. Otherwise, how would a cultivator like him be able to find out the refinement method of the sword pill so easily? That's right. Even if it was the secret place where they gathered, it was also hard for us to find it. This Zhu Qinghe has a lot of evasion spells. He almost escaped. Duan Yuming still agreed. This is also Junior Sister's intuition. I admire it very much. That's for sure. Wang Shuyao was a little proud. My intuition has always been shocking. It's not like I haven't told you before. The ink storm in the Black Forest lasted for almost a year. If not for me by your side, I'm afraid that you would have long given up, right? Yes, Junior's sister is right. Duan Yeming replied. The ink storm was so rampant. How could a few golden core cultivators survive? Moreover, because of this, we lost track of their whereabouts in such a huge black forest. How could we find them? That day, I was indeed abnormally depressed. Chapter 2016. It's useless to be depressed and kill a few cultivators to vent your anger. Wang Shuyao smiled. Her curved eyes were like crescent moons. My intuition tells me that they'll definitely escape and enter again. And the place that I'm thinking of isn't too far off, right? Duan Yuming gave her a thumbs up and praised. Junior's sister is indeed wise. That Zhu Qinghe is gone, but Chen Yi and the rest are still there. If we tail them, wouldn't it be the same as finding Zhu Qinghe? Speaking of this, Duan Yuming frowned again and said, but I still feel that something is wrong. Why? Wang Shuyao asked curiously. I don't feel it. Could it be that we've been discovered by them? That little foundation establishment. Duan Yuming shook his head and said, the one called Xiaohua is a little strange. Mo Bao is so big, but he's completely fine. The sky-climbing vine is also very powerful. Even you and I have to retreat, but he still managed to escape. It's really strange. Senior brother, you're right. Wang Shuyao nodded, and a trace of seriousness appeared on her face. I also have a trace of doubt in my heart. However, Wang Shuyao immediately raised her head and proudly said, even if he's concealed his cultivation, he's nothing compared to the two of us sword cultivators who possess offensive power close to that of a nascent soul cultivator. Senior brother, don't worry. When we go in later, it's fine if he dies. If he dies, we can use the one-heart sword technique and kill him. When you and I find the sword intent of the 9-star soaring sun, our cultivation will soon break through to sword transformation realm. It won't be a waste for us to stay in the cultivation world for so many years. Duan Yuming looked at Wang Shuyao with affection in his eyes. Sigh. It's a pity that there's no news of Yutong and Yuhi. Wang Shuyao sighed and said, we only found Yutong's flying sword and nothing else. We can't explain it to the sword master. It doesn't matter. As long as we don't find their whereabouts, as long as we don't return to the Huan sword sect, we'll be a fugitive Mandarin duck in the cultivation world. Duan Yuming gritted his teeth and seemed to say these words word by word. Wang Xiao was obviously stunned. She stared at Duan Yuming for a long time, and tears welled up in her eyes. Her two small hands clenched tightly as she muttered, Senior brother, these words, you finally said them. This little sister, I thought I would never hear them in this lifetime. Duan Yuming's face was flushed red again, as if he had drunk a lot of spirit wine. I was afraid that you would reject me. How could this little sister reject you? Wang Xiao was also abnormally shy. She said in a low voice, this little sister was afraid that senior brother would make things difficult for you, so I didn't dare. When you and I obtain sword intent and cultivate to the sword transformation stage. Duan Yuming suddenly realized something when he spoke up to hear. Wang Xiao also realized something, and a happy smile appeared in her eyes. She pointed her finger and said, Senior martial brother, let's not talk about it anymore. We should go down earlier and see if those golden core cultivators have already found Senior Li Xiubai's 9 stars transit of the sun. Yes, junior sister, come with me. As he spoke, Duan Yuming stretched out his hand. Wang Xiao hesitated for a moment before reaching out her hand. The two shook hands. In front of the lava, Xiaohua and the rest followed Zhu Qinghe around a corner. It was as if they were walking on the rugged bottom of a valley, and they came to a place where there were no bumps and depressions. Zhu Qinghe stood there and stared at it for a long time. Then, he shook his head and walked to another place. He looked again and still shook his head. After a few times, Xie Zhiqian asked in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Zhu, Is there no suitable place? I won't hide it from fellow Taoists, yeah. How could it be so easy to find the place where Li Xiaobai and Taoist Master Brightsword fought? Zhu Qinghe smiled bitterly. This is just my own guess. If it could be found so quickly, I'm afraid that the previous seniors would have already found it. And Xie Zhiqian said no more. He knew that Zhu Qinghe was telling the truth. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Zhu Qinghe was somewhat dejected. He clenched his teeth and said, I really can't find any trace of it. As for the clear sky mirror, it seems that I can only let fellow Taoist Chan use it once. I have no choice but to risk my life. As he spoke, Zhu Qinghe took out a palm-sized, purple-colored octagonal disc from his bosom. He said, I obtained this from the Huan country. It is said that it can be used to detect sword essence. However, I don't have sword essence, so I can't use it. I can only use my blood to activate it, and the range is limited. When Chang Yefeng and the others heard this, their faces unconsciously showed respect. They all nodded and said, Thank you, fellow Taoist Zhu. Okay. Zhu Qinghe took out a scarlet spirit pill from his bosom and put it into his mouth without hesitation. His face quickly turned dark red. Zhu Qinghe threw the octagonal disc into the air. Zhu Qinghe spat out a mouthful of blood onto the disc. When the disc was stained with blood, it immediately emitted a layer of light. This light was different from the light of ordinary magic treasures. It was like a fluorescent light, like flowing water. Moreover, there was a threatening coldness that was like a sharp sword piercing through his skin. Zhu Qinghe immediately took out a sword-shaped talisman from his bosom. He used his left hand to force out the magic power from the spirit pill, and the talisman shone brightly, transforming into the shape of a small sword. Go! Zhu Qinghe scolded softly. The small sword in his hand flew out and entered the octagonal plate. Woo-woo! A buzzing sound came from the octagonal plate, and the brilliance of the octagonal plate became more and more dazzling. Then, Zhu Qinghe spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood onto the octagonal disc. Zhu Qinghe's face was pale, and the octagonal disc turned purple. Buzz, with a buzzing sound, the light on the octagonal disc suddenly disappeared. A little sword light appeared from the center of the octagonal disc. The sword light instantly increased in size and turned into the shape of the small sword that just fell into the octagonal disc. At this time, Zhu Qinghe's body was slightly trembling. His hand that was holding the octagonal disc seemed to be holding a boulder as it slightly tilted down. Ka! Another sound was heard, like a sword being unsheathed. The small sword finally flew out from the octagonal disc. The tail of the small sword still had a trace of brilliance that was connected to the octagonal disc. Quick! Follow the small sword. Zhu Qinghe saw the small sword rush out and fly to the other side of the lava. He quickly caught up and ordered Xiaohua. Yes, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. His feet moved, and sure enough, he was a step faster than Xie Zhiqian and the others. He was the first to grab the lava, but that small sword was even faster. It streaked across the air with a crimson brilliance and disappeared into a crack. Although Xiaohua was a bit slower, he still saw the place where the small sword disappeared. When he arrived at the crack, he couldn't help but be stunned. This was where the 2 streams of lava intersected. The gap was about the width of a finger, and it led straight to the top of the stone wall. Vaguely, there was some light shining through it, but there was nothing special about it at all. After Xiaohua looked around, Chun Yi and the others caught up. Zhu Qinghe was actually the last. It's here. Chun, you didn't seem to believe it. After all, it was really a crack. Yes, I saw the small sword fly in here. Xiaohua nodded. However, I don't know where it landed. Good. Zhu Qinghe praised. He put the octagonal disc in his arms and said to Chang Yefeng with a smile, Fellow Taoist Chang, your clear sky mirror should be able to cover this area, right? It should be able to. Chang Yefeng nodded. He also took out a scarlet pill and swallowed it. As the pill's efficacy increased, Chang Yefeng tossed the supreme sky mirror into the air. It let out a clear ring and flashed with a swamp light. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and stared at the magic treasure. The corners of his mouth moved slightly. No one knew what he was thinking. Similarly, Chang Yefeng was also chanting. His hands were constantly making complicated seals, and he hit the clear sky mirror one after another. As the seals were hit, the clear sky mirror's brilliance didn't increase. Instead, it became dimmer and dimmer. Even the edges of the mirror began to disappear. The surface of the mirror was originally clear, and there was no image. Now, it was slowly reflecting the surrounding scenery. Oh no! Seeing that Chang Yefeng's seals were getting slower and slower, and the clear sky mirror was still not completely hidden. The scenery on the mirror was still very clear. Chang Yefeng gritted his teeth and spat a mouthful of essence blood on the clear sky mirror. Buzz buzz, a loud sound was heard. It was louder than the sound of the octagonal disc. The entire clear sky mirror emitted a dazzling clear light. In the clear light, the clear sky mirror's shape completely disappeared, leaving only a round mirror surface. The mirror surface reflected the surrounding scarlet lava. Oh, I understand. Seeing the scarlet surface of the clear sky mirror, Xiaohua suddenly realized that the clear sky mirror was the same as his Dharma eyes. It should be able to see the fluctuations of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. That was why it could see the location of the duel between Li Xiubai and immortal Ming Jian. Chang Yefeng waved his hand weakly, and the mirror surface of the clear sky mirror flew into his hand. Chang Yefeng pushed his hand. Through the fiery red mirror surface, a round object about the height of a person appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Quick! Just as Zhu Chenghe and the others were delighted, Chang Yefeng forcefully shouted again. A faint, indistinct green light was emitted from the mirror surface and hit the round object. Swish! Like rainwater rushing through the lava in front of them, ripples flashed on the lava. In a moment, a cave identical to the one on the clear sky mirror appeared in front of everyone. Great! Zhu Qinghe clapped his hands and said, "The clear sky mirror is so magical. I really didn't expect that fellow Taoist Chang would save my Dharma Chi." Cough, cough. Chang Yefeng put away the clear sky mirror and said with a bitter smile, "Fellow Taoist, Zhu has already spent a lot of effort just now. This time, it's my turn to help. Otherwise, I won't have the face to take the sword pill." Hearing this, Xie Zhiqian's face was slightly unnatural. Chapter 2017. Let's go, we'll go in. Zhu Qinghe waved his hand and glanced at Xiaohua. Xiaohua, we're a bit exhausted right now, so our physical strength can't compare to yours. You lead the way. If there's an extra sword spirit, I'll give you one. How about it? Xiaohua shook his head with a bitter smile. Senior, thank you for your kindness. I can lead the way, but I don't want that sword spirit boy. After all, I don't know how to use a flying sword. Okay, go ahead. I'll compensate you. Chun-Yi nodded. We Jinan stage seniors won't let you suffer losses. Yes. Xiaohua bowed and was about to enter the cave. Xiaohua, where's the otherworldly item you got from the Feather Immortal Assembly? Chun-Yi suddenly asked. Xiaohua was taken aback. Then, he smiled apologetically. I'll let Villa Master Chen know. That thing is really too heavy. I can't put it in my storage bag. Moreover, I can't carry it with me. Therefore, I put it in the Myriad Thunder Valley. And Chun-Yi's beautiful eyes looked at Xiaohua, not saying anything. On the other hand, Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He had told Chun-Yi many things, but he hadn't said anything important. Xiaohua had a guilty conscience about the great wisdom heavy sword, so he hadn't said anything. However, he didn't expect that. Chun-Yi actually knew about it. At this moment, Xiaohua was a bit regretful. Thinking about the Feather Immortal Assembly, the great wisdom sword, and the matter of Fairy Hong Xia. Damn it, Xiaohua's scalp went numb when he thought about it. The Feather Immortal Assembly is held once every 10 years. The 3 cultivation kingdoms of the Dawn Rain continent have held it countless times. Could it be that Chun-Yi really went to inquire about it? Alas, I really can't lie too much. Every time I lie, I have to use 10 or even 100 lies to cover it up. If this continues, this lie will eventually be exposed. Forget it. Seeing that Chun-Yi didn't ask any more questions, Xiao Hua braced himself and walked inside. Zhu Qinghe frowned and turned to look at Chun Yi. However, Chun Yi ignored him. Zhu Qinghe had no choice but to ignore her. After Xie Zhiqian and Xiao Hua, the group of 5 entered the cave. The inside of the cave was very tranquil, and a slight heat was surging in. His divine sense still couldn't be used, but a faint light penetrated from a distance. Xiao Hua walked cautiously, and he didn't encounter any danger. Of course, in such a dangerous place, how could Xiao Hua not open his left hand's delirium eyes? In his transcendence vision, everything outside the cave was fiery red, but there was nothing wrong with the inside of the cave. Just like the soft footsteps in his ears, everything was normal. As they walked to the center of the cave, faint rumbling sounds could be heard from the end of the cave. Xiao Hua was startled and raised his head. At the same time, he also raised his transcendence vision. He saw that not far away, at the end of the cave, there were flashes of red light falling down. "That's it," Zhu Qinghe exclaimed in surprise. Everyone, including Xiao Hua, quickened their steps. When they reached the end and looked to the left, everyone was overjoyed. At the end of the cave was lava. Looking to the left, there was a huge space. Inside the space, there was a faint sky light coming from somewhere, illuminating the entire space. "Sword case," Zhu Qinghe blurted out and pointed. Sure enough, in the center of the space, there was a 3 feet long and 3 inches wide sword case on top of a bulging rock. "Sword pill." Chang Yifeng also laughed. Beside the sword case, there were several sword pills with cracks on them. These sword pills were different in size, and they were exactly the same as the one Xiao Hua was refining. 8. It's really 8. Chun Yi was beaming with joy. If we add fellow Taoist Jews, it'll be 9. These 8 sword pills are just as we planned, 2 for each of us. That's strange. Where's that buzzing sound just now? Xiao Hua asked in surprise. These sword pellets had a sword spirit. Xiao Hua had long wanted to find a sword spirit and see what it was. These sword pellets were definitely a great temptation to him. However, he still didn't dare to be too impatient. "Wait," Zhu Qinghe said in a low voice. He looked around and said in a low voice, "It's a bit strange. Why is there no protection in such an important place?" However, everyone stood outside the space for a moment. The entire space was quiet. Where was the buzzing sound? "Xiao Hua, I asked you just now. Are you willing to help us?" Zhu Qinghe said solemnly. "As you can see, we've been preparing for several years. We spent a lot of spirit stones and energy. If you can bring those sword pills over, this penniless Taoist will give them to you. Furthermore, this penniless Taoist will give you the sword pill and also give you the manual to cultivate the flying sword." This, Xiao Hua looked hesitant and pretended to hesitate. "Xiao Hua, if we don't get those sword pills, we won't go out." Chun Yi said with a smile. "You can choose not to help, or you can have other plans. But if we all die here, can you afford to leave? Moreover, if you don't go..." Chun Yi said no more, but the threat was self-evident. Hearing Chun Yi's threat, Xiao Hua was unhappy. He looked at the 4 people and muttered. If he relied on his physical body, he could probably resist 2 or 4 people. However, he didn't have the kind of spirit pill that Zhu Qinghe took. If 2 of them took a spirit pill that stimulated magic power at the same time, he definitely wouldn't be their opponent. "Xiao Hua, my vitality has been greatly injured. Otherwise, I would have gone this time." Chang Yifeng stepped forward and said with a smile, "Actually, fellow Taoist Xiao invited your sect's Master Zhenyi that day to use the speed of your sect's lightning escape technique to get those sword pills. This junior understands." Xiao Hua frowned, then turned to Zhu Qinghe and said, "Junior can go and give it a try. However, I would like to ask Senior to tell me about the danger in detail. Otherwise, Junior will be confused and might lose his life." Cough, cough. Zhu Qinghe knew what Xiao Hua was referring to. He coughed twice and said, "Xiao Hua, you are a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Your status is different from ours. Although your cultivation is low, we have to be on guard against you. Perhaps you can understand everything that happened before. As for the danger now, Zhu Qinghe pointed at the sword pills and sword sheath and said, "These are probably Master Bright Sword's flying swords and Senior Li Xiaobai's sword pills. Since they are placed there, there must be a restriction around them. We don't have divine sense, and our magic power can only be activated for a moment. Right now, there isn't much difference between you and us. If you can take those sword pills, I can also give them to you. Manor Lord Chun and the others will be convinced, don't you think?" Xiaohua squinted his eyes and looked at the stone. He seemed to be thinking about it, but in reality, he had already opened his Dharma eyes and carefully examined the side of the stone. Then he sighed and said, "All right, since all of you think so highly of this junior, then this junior can only help all of you. However, Senior must give the sword orb to this junior." Chapter 2018. Hee, since you're so worried, I'll give it to you now. Zhu Qinghe took out the sword pill from his bosom and threw it to Xiaohua. Oh, Xiaohua didn't expect Zhu Qinghe to be so forthright, but his heart was at ease. After all, from what he saw with his Dharma eye, there was nothing beside the stone, and there were no restrictions. He only needed to go over and pick up the sword pellet. There was no danger at all. On the contrary, the 8 small and sharp lights inside the sword pellet and the red flying sword lights inside the sword sheath made Xiaohua really happy. Zhu Qinghe was right. These were the flying swords and sword pills left behind by Master Bright Sword and Li Xiaobai. This is the sword pill. Xiaohua took it and pretended to be curious. Zhu Qinghe said unhappily, "Xiaohua, you should go over and try it. You can't expect me to give you the sword art right now, right?" There's no need." Xiaohua smiled and put the sword pill into his bosom. He said with a smile, "Senior knows how to give Junior a medicinal pill that promotes magic power. Junior will use the flying technique to give those sword pills to Senior." Zhu Qinghe smiled bitterly. "That's for gold core cultivators to use. Your meridians are weak, so you can't use it." Chenny glanced at Zhu Qinghe and clapped her hands. She took out a jade bottle and handed it to Xiaohua. She said, "This is the bamboo marrow of Yulon bamboo. Although it can't be compared to the spirit pill you want, it's better in terms of its calmness. You can use it with your foundation establishment cultivation. Just keep it in your mouth and swallow it when you need it. I hope you won't need it." "Many thanks, Manor Head Chun." Xiaohua received it with a smile. Then he held the jade bottle in his hand, and a drop of the jade-like liquid emitting a faint bamboo fragrance dripped into his mouth. Then Xiaohua stepped towards the sword pill on the stone and held the jade bottle in his hand. He was still waiting to take the sword pill and put the bamboo marrow into the jade bottle. Moreover, Xiaohua even muttered in his heart, should he take away all the sword pills and not leave a single one for Zhu Qinghe and the others? After all, with this drop of bamboo marrow, Xiaohua had enough confidence to kill these 4 people. Seeing Xiaohua carefully walk into the stone, Zhu Qinghe and the other 3's faces showed nervousness. However, unlike Chang Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian's nervousness, Zhu Qinghe and Chen Yi's eyes still had some anxiety. The 2 of them even tilted their heads slightly and looked at each other. However, when Xiaohua walked to the edge of the rock, there was still no movement. Xiaohua stopped and stretched out his left hand. After looking at it for a moment, he turned his head and said with a smile, "Senior Zhu, I'm afraid this junior will have to take advantage of you." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand to take the sword pellets, while Chun Yi's face revealed a trace of disappointment. But it just so happened that right at this moment, the buzzing sound that everyone heard just now suddenly rang out. Xiaohua was stunned, and he hurriedly raised his left hand to meet the eye. An extremely brilliant red light flashed past, and even as I couldn't help but close. Hearing the exclamations of Zhu Qinghe and the rest, Xiaohua immediately knew that the situation was bad. A crimson-red sword light was born from the sword sheath beside the sword pellet, and a fierce sharpness and intimidating aura instantly enveloped Xiaohua. Shit! Xiaohua didn't expect that the flying sword from the sword sheath would suddenly attack. While he was greatly alarmed, he immediately swallowed the jade essence into the air. Instantly, A warm current flowed through his meridians like true essence. Xiao Hua urged his magic power without hesitation and immediately used the bright thunder escape. In addition to the misty steps under his feet, his entire body flew to the side. However, Xiao Hua had just urged his magic power, and his body had only moved 3 feet when the true essence formed by the jade essence suddenly disappeared. His magic power flowed out, and Xiao Hua's body naturally stagnated for a moment. At this moment, the sword light that was more than 3 feet long chopped at the top of Xiao Hua's head. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed, and his feet staggered in succession, wanting to block this mountain-like sword light. Unfortunately, that sword light was set up by Taoist Master Brightsword. That was a flying sword of a nascent soul cultivator, and it was the work of great magic power. If Xiao Hua had the bright thunder escape, he might still have a chance. But now, how could he dodge it by relying on misty steps, this kind of extreme movement technique? Seeing the incomparable sword light chopping down at a speed that Xiao Hua couldn't think of, Xiao Hua held the great wisdom sword in his hand without hesitation and raised it up, wanting to block the flying sword. But with a loud dang, the sword light above Xiao Hua's head was blocked. A huge force was transmitted to Xiao Hua's body, and then to his feet. A shining crack appeared under Xiao Hua's feet. At the same time, the tip of the red sword light suddenly bent down like a soft sword, and the speed at which it chopped down was twice as fast as before. Xiao Hua simply didn't have time to dodge. With a pu sound, it neatly chopped his back. A burst of brilliance flashed, and Xiao Hua's protective spirit armor was only able to resist for a moment before it was split into 2 by that incomparable sword light. Xiao Hua let out a heart-wrenching scream, and his entire body fell into the brilliance that appeared under his feet. The unforeseen event that Xiao Hua encountered was really too fast. That sword light flashed and disappeared. Although Xiao Hua flew for a distance, in the eyes of Zhu Qinghe and the others, it was only an instant. The brilliance of Xiao Hua's spirit armor was annihilated, and they saw it with their own eyes. Xiao Hua's heart-wrenching scream was also heard by them. Although Xiao Hua's body fell into the brilliance, they knew that Xiao Hua's body must have been split open by that incomparably sharp sword light. When his body landed on the ground, it would definitely split into 2 halves. After a moment, Xie Zhiqian took a deep breath, and his eyes were filled with joy. Indeed, if Xiao Hua hadn't come here, the one who would have been split into 2 halves by that sword light would have definitely been him. Fellow Taoist Xie. Zhu Qinghe's voice sounded by his ear again. According to our agreement, this time it should be fellow Taoist Xie's turn to step forward. Xie Zhiqian was a little surprised. It's fine, Chun Yi said with a smile. As long as it's an ownerless flying sword, it only has the power for 1 attack. Xiao Hua is dead, so naturally there won't be any danger. Don't be afraid. All right. Xie Zhiqian understood that he was similar to Xiao Hua. That is, the Firebat King was his effort, and everything else was arranged by Zhu Qinghe. If he didn't go, who else would go? Xie Zhiqian took out a scarlet spirit pill and put it in his mouth. Then, like Xiao Hua, he cautiously approached the sword pellet. At this moment, Xie Zhiqian didn't look at anything else but the sword case. He was prepared to wait for the sword case to change. Then he would leave and flee. Fortunately, until Xie Zhiqian touched the sword pellet, the sword case didn't have any movement. That terrifying buzzing sound just now also didn't come out in the slightest. Great. Xie Zhiqian picked up a sword pellet and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Zhu, it's fine. These 8 sword pellets are now ours. Ha ha ha. Chang Yifeng laughed and walked to Xie Zhiqian's side. He reached out and grabbed the 2 largest sword pellets and said, There are exactly 8 of them. We each have 2, and this trip is complete. That's right, it's complete. This is the completion of our Huan country's sword cultivation. 2 cold voices came from behind Zhu Qinghe. A rainbow-like sword light and a sword light like a fish in the sea flew out at the same time. They drew a dazzling brilliance in the air and pierced towards Xie Qian and Chang Yefeng. Xie Qian was shocked. He didn't have time to touch the sword pellet. He swallowed the spirit pill in his mouth and waved his hand. A meteor-like flying sword met Duan Yuming's rainbow sword. He also slapped his hand and took out a shield-like magic treasure from his storage bag. Clang! Xie Qian's flying sword collided with the rainbow sword and was immediately annihilated by the rainbow sword light. Immediately after, it was knocked into the air and the brilliance on the sword disappeared. Like a piece of scrap metal, it hit the stone wall and fell to the ground. Fellow Taoist Jew, save me. This was Chang Yefeng's cry for help. He had just forcefully used the clear sky mirror and his vitality was damaged. It was too late for him to take out a spirit pill. Seeing countless colorful fish surrounding him and about to drown him, he couldn't help but cry out. But just as his voice sounded, the colorful fish immediately opened their mouths and pounced on Chang Yefeng's body. Chang Yefeng's body flashed with brilliance. It was the protective brilliance and the protection of Chang Yefeng's magic treasure. Unfortunately, Wang Shuyao's attack power was comparable to that of a nascent soul stage cultivator. Although her sword origin was restrained, it was not something Chang Yefeng could resist. Puff, puff, puff. Dozens of places on Chang Yefeng's body were ruptured and blood gushed out like a fountain. At the same time, Duan Yuming's rainbow sword suddenly trembled. Like a seven-colored satin, it quickly wrapped around Xie Qian from the bottom to the top. With a muffled sound, Xie Qian's scream could not be heard. Blood spurted out from his neck. Xie Qian's head was chopped off by the rainbow sword. "Vill ahead, Chun. Let's hurry. We definitely can't let these two sword cultivators get the sword orb." The sword cultivators' attacks were really powerful. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Zhu Qinghe only had time to give Chun an order before Chang Yefeng and Xie Qian were already dead. Yes. Chun Yi heard him, and her body floated up, pouncing on the sword pill. Zhu Qinghe naturally moved in another direction. Wang Shuyao and Duan Yuming sneered and also pounced on the sword pill. The two flying swords were also driven by them and suddenly turned around. But just as the two of them flew into the air and the flying swords turned around, Zhu Qinghe and Chun Yi suddenly turned around at the same time. They actually went back to the hole of the revolving space. Duan Yuming was stunned and whispered, "Junior sister, go and kill these two people. I'll take senior sword pill." "Yes, senior brother," Wang Shuyao responded and suddenly turned around. The sword light that was like a fish also followed her and chased after Zhu Qinghe and Chun Yi. "Let's go." Zhu Qinghe and Chun Yi's figures landed at the entrance of the cave. They whispered and quickly ran out of the cave. Unfortunately, even though the two of them had prepared elixirs in advance, the amount of spiritual power they could mobilize was still limited. They had just flown less than 10 feet when Wang Shuyao had already caught up. Seeing the layers of fish fiercely pouncing over, Zhu Qinghe was greatly shocked and couldn't help but shout, "Envoy, save me!" "Ha ha!" A rough laugh sounded from outside the cave, and a voice came, "Martial Nephew Zhu has worked hard to lure these two cunning sword cultivators here. How can we bear to let you lose your life?" Chapter 2019. Who is it? Wang Shuyao was shocked. Just as she was about to retrieve the swimming fish sword, two large hands flew in from outside the cave. One of the large hands slapped down with lightning speed, holding the swimming fish sword in its hand. With a slight force, all the fish were annihilated, leaving only the flying sword in the large hand, which was overflowing with brilliance. Nascent soul cultivator? Wang Shuyao was shocked. She knew that she had fallen into someone's trap. She couldn't care less about her flying sword being retrieved and turned to escape into the cave. However, the other large hand had already slapped down on Wang Shuyao's head. A fierce aura came from the large hand and shackled Wang Shuyao's body. If she had the swimming fish sword at this time, Wang Shuyao might not be powerless to fight back. She might even be able to break through the big hand. However, now that two nascent soul cultivators were attacking her at the same time, the swimming fish sword was already restrained. All her cultivation was on the flying sword. Under the big hand, she was indeed somewhat helpless. But seeing the large hand about to reach her head, Wang Shuyao's face turned ashen. She gritted her teeth and opened her cherry lips slightly. A mouthful of sword essence was spat out and attacked the large hand. At this moment, the other large hand clenched slightly, and Wang Shuyao's flying sword was caught by the large hand. The entire flying sword was actually melted into the shape of a ball. Ah! A scream came from Wang Shuyao's mouth. Her sword essence also dimmed. Taking advantage of this moment, the large hand that was covering Wang Shuyao suddenly slapped down. Wang Shuyao no longer had any power to fight back, and her body was slapped to the ground. Junior's sister, hearing Wang Shuyao scream, Duan Yuming rushed out. Seeing Wang Shuyao being slapped to the ground by the large hand of a nascent soul cultivator, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. With a wave of his hand, the rainbow sword turned into a 7-colored rainbow and rushed towards the large hand. Go! A soft shout came from the cave. The large hand picked up from the ground again and clenched into a fist to hit the rainbow sword. Poof! The rainbow sword pierced the giant hand. The giant hand shook as if it was about to collapse. Just as the giant hand flashed with brilliance, another giant hand took the opportunity to pounce from the side, and with a slap, easily covered Duan Yuming. Duan Yuming felt an unparalleled power of imprisonment. He had never thought that after scheming for so many years and following Zhu Qinghe for so many years, he would become a mantis in the end. What made his heart ache the most was that he had just confided in Wang Shuyao, and their relationship had just undergone a fundamental change. But as Wang Shuyao had already died in the hands of a nascent soul cultivator. God, why are you so unfair? Duan Yuming couldn't help but shout. The heavens are naturally fair. A tall and thin, early nascent soul cultivator emerged from the cave. It was none other than the cultivator who had chased after Xiao Hua in the ink cloud black forest. The nascent soul cultivator sneered. Do you know how many cultivators you've killed in the 3 kingdoms of cultivation? Although you've carefully chosen the cultivators you've killed, they are still cultivators of the 3 kingdoms of cultivation. How can we let you do whatever you want? Humph, don't talk so much with him. This guy is too cunning. We have searched for him many times, but couldn't catch him. Now that he is here to catch a turtle in a jar, don't let him escape again. The other nascent soul cultivator's hand also flew into the air and firmly covered Duan Yuming. How can you cultivators know the divine abilities of us, sword cultivators? Duan Yuming sneered and waved his hand. 8 sword balls flew into the air at the same time. At the same time, Duan Yuming opened his mouth and spat out a stream of life essence. In an instant, 8 streams of life essence rushed into the 8 sword balls. Senior, don't let this guy control the sword balls. Zhu Qinghe shouted anxiously. Let me slap him to death. The cultivator who covered Duan Yuming sneered and pressed his hand down. He wanted to slap Duan Yuming as if he wanted to slap Wang Shuyao to death. However, the 8 sword balls above Duan Yuming's head suddenly emitted a brilliant light. The 8 sword beams flew straight up and pierced through the big hand. With a loud boom, the nascent soul cultivator's big hand collapsed. Following the collapse of the nascent soul cultivator's big hand, the 8 sword beams also dimmed. At the same time, the other nascent soul cultivator roared, Go! The other big hand slapped down. Duan Yuming's eyes flashed with determination. Looking at the badly mutilated Wang Shuyao, he slapped his forehead. A faint light overflowed from the top of his head. However, just as this light appeared, the nascent soul cultivator's big hand had already slapped down. Duan Yuming was slapped under the big hand without any suspense. Haha, the nascent soul cultivator laughed and said, The emissary always said that this sword cultivator is powerful. In I's opinion, he is only SOSO. Fellow Taoist, be careful. Before the nascent soul cultivator finished speaking, the other nascent soul cultivator hurriedly shouted. The nascent soul cultivator was startled. Under his big hand, the 9 sword beams flashed and actually rushed towards Chun, Yi, and Zhu Qinghe. What was special was that one of the sword beams actually landed on a rainbow sword that had just fallen to the ground. The rainbow sword also flew up and was actually only half a step slower than the other 8 sword beams. Senior, Chun Yi turned pale with fright and hurriedly shouted, "Don't be afraid." The 2 nascent soul cultivators who were already standing beside Chun Yi and Zhu Qinghe were extremely calm. They casually rubbed their hands together, and a few faint beams of light appeared in front of the 4 of them. Puff, puff, puff. A series of noises could be heard as the 9 sword beams pierced through the beams of light. However, the beams of light only flickered and were unable to pierce through them. The 9 streaks of sword light seemed to be exhausted as they fell from the sky. However, just as they fell half an inch, the 8 streaks of sword light once again emitted extremely brilliant sword light. Like poisonous snakes that had their tails stepped on, they rushed towards the 2 nascent soul cultivators to bite them. When the 2 nascent soul cultivators saw this, their faces were filled with astonishment. Both of them reached out their hands at the same time, as if trying to capture the sword lights. However, the 8 sword lights only paused in midair for a moment before rushing back into their hands. Damn it! The tall and thin nascent soul cultivator was slightly angered. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of life essence. It transformed into a 1-foot square shield in front of him. 4 of the flying swords actually destroyed the shield and stopped in midair like a dead fish. This is bad, Senior. That rainbow sword. Just as the tall and thin cultivator snorted coldly, he heard Chun Yi scream. When he looked up, he didn't know when, but the rainbow sword had already flown more than 10 feet away from the ground. Still want to run? The tall and skinny cultivator slapped his forehead, and another large hand was about to appear. However, the rainbow sword suddenly emitted a terrifying blood-red light, and its speed suddenly increased. Before the large hand could appear, it had already rushed out of the cave. Chapter 2020. This is bad. The tall and skinny cultivator didn't think too much and flew out of the cave. Unfortunately, even though he was a nascent soul cultivator, his magic power and divine sense were restricted here. By the time he flew out of the cave, the rainbow sword had already disappeared. Clap, 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 clap. A few claps sounded beside the tall and skinny cultivator. A voice said, "Senior is indeed powerful. You easily killed 2 evil sword cultivators on the spot. This merit cannot go unnoticed. I will definitely report this matter to the Alliance Master." When the tall and skinny cultivator heard this, his eyes turned slightly and a smile appeared on his face. He said to the cultivator in camouflage who had just turned around, "I don't dare." This was all planned by the emissary. It was the emissary's amazing strategy. We only did our best. Hee, Senior is wrong. This was all planned by the Alliance Master. How could Junior dare to be greedy? The cultivator said with a smile. But the tall and skinny cultivator looked worriedly at the rainbow sword that disappeared into the distance. The emissary didn't seem to see the rainbow sword fly away. He pointed at the sword orb in the tall and skinny cultivator's hand and said, "Is that Li Xiaobai's sword orb?" "Yes. If I guess correctly, it is Li Xiaobai's sword orb." The cultivator quickly replied. Duan Yuming also put it away and activated it. Its power is indeed powerful. At this moment, another nascent soul cultivator walked out with Zhu Qinghe and Chun Yi. He held another 4 sword orbs and a sword case in his hand and said, "We followed the emissary's plan and really found a place that sword cultivators covet. We didn't come here and didn't even touch the things inside for fear of arousing Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao suspicion. Therefore, this is the first time Marshal Nephew Zhu came here. It is also the first time for us. And to be able to set up the emissary's plan, it is all thanks to Marshal Nephew Zhu. If he didn't find this place, Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao might not have been fooled. That's right. Su Yin School's Zhu Qinghe and Burial Flower Manor's Chen Yi. This emissary will remember them. I will definitely report everyone's merit to the Alliance Master. The emissary nodded and said, "These sword orbs, how to deal with them?" The tall and skinny nascent soul cultivator said with a smile, "Why not let the emissary take them back? This thing can be considered a rare item. Forget it. You've worked hard for so many years. How can I take away your hard work? You can split these 8 sword pellets among yourselves." The emissary waved his hand and took out a storage pouch. "This is some reward. Although it's not much, it's still a small token of appreciation from the Alliance leader." "I don't dare." The tall and skinny cultivator took it and then looked at the other nascent soul cultivator. The cultivator handed the sword case to the messenger and smiled. "This is the flying sword of Taoist Bright Sword of the Changbai sect. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for us to take it, so please handle it yourself." "Well, this thing is indeed a bit troublesome. I handle it." The emissary put the sword case into the storage bag and looked up at the cave with a smile. If it weren't for Zhu Qinghe, this emissary wouldn't have thought that Li Xiubai and Reverend Bright Swords and Flying Swords were hidden here. It's really unexpected. Indeed, even I didn't really believe Marshal Nephew Zhu that day either. The tall and skinny cultivator nodded. However, even if there's nothing, Marshal Nephew Zhu has already done a great deed by being able to lure 2 sword cultivators here. Hee. Not to mention killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The emissary said with a smile. "I don't dare." Zhu Qinghe was very respectful at this time. Chen Yi also smiled apologetically and didn't dare to say more. "Well, this matter is over." I also passed on the Alliance leader's message. "All you have to be careful." The emissary instructed again. "Chen Yi's Burial Flower Manor is going to move again." "Yes, I'll follow the emissary's instructions." Chen Yi pursed her lips and smiled. "My Burial Flower Manor won't stay in one place for long." "Good." The emissary clapped his hands and said, "Let's go. We don't know who will come here next time. We also don't know if they will think that we cultivators killed 2 sword cultivators here." The tall and skinny nascent soul cultivator had a trace of a bitter smile on his face as he looked at the other nascent soul cultivator. 10 days later, on a foothill outside the ink cloud Black Forest, the emissary watched Zhu Qinghe, Chen Yi, and the 2 nascent soul cultivators disappear. Only then did he turn around and fly in another direction. When there was no one around, he removed the Mimi. He saw an early Foundation establishment cultivator who was about 20 years old. He wore an ordinary Taoist robe and had delicate features and a scholarly face. It was the deputy sect leader Zhang Ji, who was personally appointed by Heavenly Demon Sect's Zhang Qingxiao. Originally, I wanted you to kill the 2 sword cultivators, but you actually let one of them escape. This is good. The sect leader's plan is even more perfect and absolutely flawless. Isn't this the heaven's plan to let I do it? Zhang Zhihao said to himself coldly. The sect leader's wisdom is unparalleled in this world. Dao sect, they are really stupid pigs. Soon after, Zhang Zhihao flew away in a grandiose manner. No one knew that such a soul-stirring thing had happened in the Ink Zhao Black Forest. No one knew that Xiao Hua had lost his life in the Ink Zhao Black Forest. As for Zhang Zhihao, although he was one of Zhang Qingxiao's doppelgangers, Zhang Qingxiao now specialized in Dao techniques. For the sake of Zhang Jihao's safety and secrecy, she did not keep in touch with him at all times like before and turned Zhang Jihao's knowledge into her own knowledge. How did Zhang Qingxiao know that Xiao Hua had died? Moreover, Zhu Qinghe did not mention the loss of Xie Zhiqian and Chang Yefeng, the Golden Core cultivators. Zhang Zhihao did not ask at all, let alone Xiao Hua, the Foundation establishment cultivator. Even Chen Yi would never mention it again. Unfortunately, the The matter was far from what they knew. Sometimes, what they saw might not be the truth. When Xiao Hua's figure fell into the brilliance, that incomparable sword light chopped down from his back. In the eyes of Zhu Qinghe and the others, Xiao Hua was split into two halves. In the eyes of Zhu Qinghe and the others, perhaps because the sword light was too powerful and the sword edge was too sharp, there was no bloody light for a moment, nor was there the tragic sight of Xiao Hua's body being split into two halves. In fact, Xiao Hua's scream was really tragic. It was really from the horror in his heart. It was truly terrifying. It was even more horrifying than that day when his meridians were almost broken by the earth-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth. After all, this was a blow from a true nascent soul cultivator's flying sword. It was a blow that really killed Xiao Hua. But when Xiao Hua shouted and released his horror, he suddenly heard a kacha sound in his mind. The expected pain did not come. Instead, his vision blurred and his figure appeared in midair. Moreover, his figure rapidly fell down. "Ouch, my butt!" Xiao Hua roared and jumped up from the ground. He touched his butt and scolded. "Who is so uncultured to put some needles on such soft grass? Don't you know that this soft grass is used for something else?" Immediately, Xiao Hua quickly touched his body and even touched an extremely important place. He said to himself in bewilderment, "Damn it, this young master, is this not dead?" Then, Xiao Hua seemed to have thought of something. He quickly untied his Taoist robe and took out the voodoo puppet that was tied with a purple ribbon from his neck. However, the voodoo puppet had already been split into two halves. The corners of the voodoo puppet's mouth drooped again. Good heavens, this voodoo puppet is actually real. It's actually this powerful. Xiao Hua opened his eyes wide and looked at the voodoo puppet that was split into two halves in disbelief. To be honest, when he was refining the voodoo puppet, he didn't really believe it. After all, this was witchcraft, not Taoist techniques. Moreover, it could substitute death. What kind of almighty ability was this? What a pity. Now that the voodoo puppet has been destroyed, I'm afraid it has already been used 3 times. Xiao Hua felt extremely regretful. He carefully put away the voodoo puppet and thought, witchcraft has such a heaven-defying effect. How can it be lost? Looks like this young master needs to properly search for it. These things that others don't know about are definitely useful in crucial moments of life and death. Today, if it wasn't for this voodoo puppet, this young master would have died here without anyone knowing. Sigh, what a pity for this young master's spiritual armor. Xiao Hua took off the spiritual armor and carefully put it into his storage bag. He then took out the spiritual armor that Gantian Mountain gave him and put it on. He shook his shoulders left and right and said with a frown, "This spiritual armor, why is it so uncomfortable? I keep feeling that it smells like Qian Diheng's body odor." "Ah, done," Xiao Hua said and raised his hands in the air. He let out a long breath and said, "The feeling of being alive is really good," Xiao Hua said, and lowered his head to look at the pile of bones on the grass. He sighed and said, "These bones probably all met the same fate as this young master." Unfortunately, different people have different endings. This young master's life is good. Following which, Xiao Hua looked around and was shocked. He saw that this was a place filled with lush greenery. A layer of spiritual grass covered the ground. In the distance, there were a few tall trees with twisted branches. The lush green leaves on the trees rustled in the wind. A gurgling sound like that of a zither could be heard from the stream, causing Xiao Hua's excited mood to calm down. Xiao Hua raised his head again. Above his head was a sky blue color. It wasn't much different from the sky that he usually saw. Furthermore, above the sky blue, there were traces of white. It was extremely similar to the white clouds. Sigh, such a calm and peaceful place. After experiencing life and death, only then do I know that this is the most beautiful. Xiao Hua sighed. Just as he was about to walk around and look around, he suddenly heard the sound of wading in the stream. He couldn't help but sweep out with his spiritual sense. As expected, in the stream, there was a little deer that looked like a lamb looking at him in fear. It seemed to be able to sense Xiao Hua's spiritual sense and frantically walked around the stream. After running a few feet, it hurriedly went ashore and hid in the dense forest behind the stream. My spiritual sense can be used. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. However, when he swept out with his spiritual sense again, in the dense forest behind the stream, apart from trees, there were only trees. The little deer was nowhere to be found. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.